everyone. Welcome to Base Cafe with Holly and Dean. I'm Holly.
And I'm Dean.
Today we're going to be talking about pro level. We have some awesome stuff to talk about today. Basically, just how do you get to be a pro level musician or bassist and what it takes to be on those big tours. And then we have a special guest who is on a lot of those big tours with some of those pro level guys. My friend Ace Bergman, who is one of the, I guess, I don't know, famous in my eyes as far as crew goes. Like he's been on tour with Slash. He's been on tour with Glenn Hughes. He's been on tour with just everybody, right? Gavin Rossdale.
Gavin Rossdale. Was
Yeah.
was that edited? Was that put into the interview? Did you put that in there? I didn't watch that part of our podcast. Like,
Yeah, it was in there.
yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So, if you want to hear my Gavin Rossdale story, you just have to watch episode 5 because I love it and I have no shame. I have no shame. I'm just saying, dude. The best part about being a musician is not only being like in bands but being fans of bands,
Mhm.
right? Like why are we musicians? First off,
Yeah, because
because there was a CD or an album or a cassette tape that we wore the out.
yeah.
That what went through dog piss and ex-girlfriends and friends' cars and had to be like got eaten by a machine or two and had to be spooled up and then like record, and then that tape got messed up and so you heard the song on the radio, so you recorded the song on the radio on the tape and then you made your own mixtape and then you gave it to your friends. Everybody had a jam.
Yeah, yeah.
Yo, what was your jam? This is so off script. We have the guys, and we have a whole script, and I'm off. What was your jam? What
Right.
like made you like go for music? I have a song.
Um, I don't. I know that as far as melding my poetry with wanting to be a guitarist, probably Nirvana, because my second my second CD that I got was it my second one? Was it my first one? Maybe it was my first one. Was Nevermind. Yeah, I think my first CD was Nevermind.
That was within my first CD ever was Insomniac by Green Day.
Yeah. So I just knew that I liked all the songs on there, and I obviously like Nirvana, but he was very poetic, and so that was something I was wanting to get into and play guitar.
So Nirvana made you want to be a guitarist? Because I had like favorite songs before, right?
It,
I have
yeah.
my list of like my favorite songs. Like I can tell you that I think my first two ever favorite songs. My first ever was Bohemian Rhapsody. My second was Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper. Those were two songs that like I wore out on everything that I had. Back then it was recording, it was like cassette tape recordings of my mom's album.
Yeah.
That's how I would get it. And then I would wear out the
Yeah.
tape. Like, right.
Yeah. I would always record the cassettes from whatever
Yeah, you
radio.
get all the static in there from the album
Uh,
and from the tape. So by the
yeah.
time you listen to it, it's just like it sounds like a Cannibal Corpse concert. It's like
Tapes flying out of the machine.
yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, so Nirvana, yeah, that was one of my first CDs where I was like, okay, I want to start doing more music with this, but I wanted to do
What
music
one song? What song made you like did you fall in love with on that CD?
on that CD.
Yeah, like that was like, all right, I'm gonna do this.
Well, okay, so "Come as You Are," that was my first song I learned. "Come as You Are." Um, then I learned "Heart Shaped Box."
Was Come As You Are your favorite? Is that why you learned it first, or
I
was
think it
it
was the
like
easiest. It was probably the easiest that I could get down with my guitar teacher that I had at the time. Because this was when I was 13. This is when I started actually playing, trying to go and learn. Because before that, we've talked about like I've had a lot of experience with wanting to do it. I just never did it. And
right?
then 13 is when I tried my first time. So my teacher, the first those were the first two songs, and there was Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, I think was another song I was learning.
See,
But yeah,
all that shit's so hard, right? Like even come as you are, like if for a beginning player,
yeah,
that shit's hard. Like I
yeah.
I wanted to play,
Uh,
right? But like kind of sort of.
mhm.
And like I even had a guitar, like even all this stuff. Like I could give you a whole timeline, right? But once like The Beautiful People was my jam by Marilyn Manson. And once I just saw someone do it and I saw how easy it was, I at that moment, I remember I was in my friend Adam Frisella's bedroom and I like, I was figuring out guitar. I didn't really know what drop D tuning even was, but he played that riff and I loved that song so much. Like I wore out tapes. I had this one tape I recorded off the off the radio. It was my own mixtape and it's so weird and I don't know and don't ask me to explain this, but there's only two songs on that tape on one side and then the same two songs on the other side. That's it. And it was The Beautiful People by Marilyn Manson that I recorded off of 92.3 K Rock, followed by Love Me by the Cardigans. Couldn't be two more different songs.
Wow. Did you paint one side of the cassette white and one side black?
No, it was it. But like, and I remember like everybody loved The Beautiful People. So everybody must have thought I was something very strange because back then we used to, I don't know about this kids, but we used to borrow, like I guess like you borrow someone's phone when you don't have like the coolest phone and they have this app or whatever. Back then we used to bring our cassette tapes to school and like our cassette players. And this one dude, John Dilger, would always ask during computer class to listen to my tape, tape deck, my Walkman, and that was the tape that was in it. It was just those two songs, and like it's so weird. It's so weird
Which
that I
one was he
remember that.
listening to?
What?
Was he listening to the Cardigans?
I think he just wanted to listen to The Beautiful People, and I don't know if he like, but see, back then, everybody, not every,
Right?
but when you got the five and dime
Uh-huh.
Walkman because you broke too many, right? And you start getting the five and dime Craig Walkmans, and Jomies, not the Sonys, but the Jomies, you know what I mean? When you start, when you start getting the Jomies,
Off brands.
um, they don't always have a rewind button. So the reason why it had the same two songs in the beginning of each side is because I listened to the two songs and then have to hit the fast forward button because it was just
Yeah.
play, stop, fast forward, no rewind, right? And so you'd listen to the two songs and then you fast forward to the end and then you flip the tape and you get those two songs again.
Yep. Yeah.
Whew. Just like
Yeah. It's almost like
I
tape
just
was
had like a flashback, dude. I was living that moment just now.
tape was one of the ugly stepchildren of the recording mediums.
As we discussed, I believe in our first or second episode, right?
Yeah. Not only is it amazing as far as like it's amazing sonically, but you just can't do anything else with it.
I just noticed your upright bass is back. It looks like you
Yeah,
didn't. It looks
that's
like you didn't
true.
even leave. It looks like you went back to your other place.
Yeah, I went to the other spot. I have several spots I can do these at, and if the jam room is closed for other jams, then I have to go to the other spot.
All right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Oh, and speaking of jam rooms, I saw that you did a jam on your Patreon, right?
yeah, I'm doing jams on Twitch. They're live on Twitch, and then you can get the recorded version on my Patreon. So it's like if you wanted to sign up for the $5 tier, just to make sure you get to watch all of the jams and a couple of like acoustic stuff and things that I do. It's just $5 a month. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to. We'll stream them live and then record them, and I'll have them on there. But it's pretty fun. It's been a lot of fun. The first jam we did was Clutch inspired, so we would listen to a Clutch song and then I'd get an idea and it turned out pretty
I
cool.
love the Clutch Groove. If
Yeah,
you
you'll
guys
like
don't know, man. Oh,
to
the
listen to
Clutch
it.
Groove, it's so
And then
good.
the second one we did, no, I'm sorry. The first one we did was Led Zeppelin, and the second one was Clutch. And then the third one we had people call out keys, and then I would just play in a key, whatever we were playing, whatever we're jamming.
So it sounds like you're doing some pro level shiz.
Key, maybe.
Right. It
I
sounds
guess
like,
that's what pro level is now.
you know. Um, so the main point of this episode is going to be like what is really required for higher level gigs of any
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah.
Um, in this case, our guest was a tech, right? And I mean, dude, techs are such an integral part of the
Yeah.
gigs. Like
Huge
a
part.
gig can fall or rise, based on the tech alone.
Mhm. Yeah. And a lot of things that he said in the interview were, he's got to be the right man for the job because he's got to know all the parts and he's got to know what makes something. If he we're talking about going from different tones and stuff, and if you're in a fly-in gig, what he opens a box and there's a new head and a new amp or a new amp and a new cabinet, but it's nothing's dialed in, and he's got to figure out how to dial this in perfectly for this artist, and you've got to make sure you
So
know
you got to
all.
know your stuff. Like,
Yeah.
there's been a couple of gigs, and I'm sure techs do it, man. Like, you get hired for if you get hired for Hatebreed, you know what your playlist should be the entire time that you're flying into this Hatebreed gig.
Hatebreed.
Hatebreed. Like, um, I for the couple of gigs that I work for other bands where I'm their tech, if I don't know them, I do nothing but nonstop listen to that band, live performances,
Mhm.
and studio recordings. You want to know your gig. You want to know what they need prior to it. Uh,
Exactly.
all those gigs are hard.
Yeah.
Being a tech is one of the it can be one of the hardest jobs of the tour. It can be one of the easiest jobs of the tour, like sometimes, but that one day, the whole tour that you really earn your money, it's just not a walk in the park. Sometimes there's like the
Just
worst case scenario and you defuse the atomic bomb
yeah.
1 second before detonation and it's go time.
Yeah.
And then it goes, and then the whole time that like the show's going on, everyone's kind of like, is it gonna fall? And it doesn't. That day, what happens to your heart? Your heart beats 45 times more than every other heart of the person screaming in the crowd. I swear to God to you. Because all you want is all those hearts pumping, and you feel so responsible. You
Yeah.
know, you feel
Yeah, you have a huge responsibility. I mean, even though the artist is out there playing the music, it's the tech's responsibility that the power cord is in the right position and the amps are on. So
to make sure the
they're up
nervous
there,
the nervous system of the consciousness of that like art experiment is firing
Yeah, yeah. But and you
and
would be surprised.
flawlessly, mind you.
Mhm. And you'd be surprised, well, you might not be, but some of our listeners might be, what bassists are out there that don't really know a lot about their gear. They leave it up to their bass tech, and they choose a bass tech because they know how to set up their bass correctly and do everything. Then you have artists that do it all and they come prepared and they've already done everything and your job is a walk in the park. So it's best to kind of be able to take it either way. Either be there completely 100% for the artist, making sure that you're basically catering and to them, or they're showing up and you're just making sure that everything goes the way that they want it to. So it's pretty good. I mean, being at that pro level, uh, he does a lot of big tours. So the good thing about being on a big tour is that everything's kind of already set in motion, and you already have all your backup there. You have pretty much everything you need there. But if you're doing a one-off tour, say like he gets a one-off tour in Aruba, and you really just have to make sure your rig is there and everything is there, you're ready to work, and it can be very interesting, I think.
And then there's like the transition. Sometimes, like, so much of the importance for trying to be as much the man for the job as possible, woman for the job, the person for the job as possible, is because you never want to be the person who's sent home from a tour. I've almost left tours. Everybody's has like their bad tour story, right? Like everyone has like the hell tour story. And if you don't, you will. Don't worry. Like you will. And I'm not talking about the day-to-day stuff. I'm talking about like the one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and like in those times, new techs get flown in. Like if you're a tech who's done their stuff, if you're a band member who's done their stuff, and you're getting flown into this gig last minute, and it's your job to not only fill those shoes of whatever that person was doing, obviously, and more, right? And more than what that person was doing who got sent home or had to leave sometimes. Sometimes like Superman has to go home and fight another fire, and then another guy has to come in and fill Superman's shoes. That
Yeah.
isn't easy either.
Yeah.
That's not
I mean,
easy either.
if you look at, all the famous bassists that are out there, there are equally just as famous in our world techs.
Yeah, if you don't know, I can tell you that amongst musicians, the techs are the rock stars. Very often. Not always, but like, dude, you get some guys.
Yeah,
You
you get
get
some
some
guys.
guys that and girls, like you get some stage workers of any sort that
Yeah.
sometimes you look at them and you remember them just as much as the dude who shredded that solo that blew you away.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And the good thing is that when the artist doesn't know, the tech usually knows the answer. If the artist doesn't know the answer, you can always get a good answer from the tech.
Dude, how many rig rundowns do you watch on on Premiere Guitar? I'm an idiot.
Okay. Yeah.
Premiere Guitar, all those rig rundowns. I watch every single one.
Mhm.
Um, if there's the occasion that the artist is like doing the one who's like
Uh,
walking through their gear, there's
uh,
always a question about strings or picks or something that they're like,
I don't know.
Tom. there's always one like, hey Ed,
Yeah.
what do we use on this one? Like there's always one of those.
I asked him, kind of string specific out there, what are the main strings that everybody's using? Because I use hand wound DR strings, and I've heard from not very many people, but some people don't like the hand wound versus, there's regular wound strings,
Yeah.
machine wound. Um,
Machine wound. They might
yeah,
not be as tight. I mean, but you're also buying the characteristic, right? I'm there.
right.
I've been to DR. I've been to
Yeah, I
DR.
know.
And I know exactly how those shits are wound. And I'll tell you that the hand wound,
Yeah.
I cannot see it being any different in a negative way to how like the machine wound is. Like it's either as good or better. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I've seen it. I've seen them.
Right. And I guess
Crazy.
what I've heard, I won't mention the person's name, but it's a very famous guitar player, told me at one point that they stopped doing that because, or going to DR because they could tell a difference. Now, this is a person who's been playing guitar since they were, a baby, and for some reason, I guess sonically, that's what.
Listen, it's all personal preference. Every amp, every tone, every bass, every string, every pick, every cable, every wireless, every plug-in, every effect, every microphone, it doesn't matter. it's all preference, right? Everybody doesn't like something about something and likes something else more for
Right.
X reason.
Yeah.
Like it just comes down to what resonates with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, like being a tech or being a bassist or being a musician of any kind of being in a band, you're going to find a common theme here, right? You're going to find that these people who are trying to reach these goals, they're always practicing.
Mm-hmm.
They're always working on their craft. They're always techs are always building stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Static X guitar tech, Shoddy,
Mm-hmm.
he in his off time he was building guitars for people, trying to
Yeah.
entice, like being
That's what
creative during these
Ace
non-tour times.
does.
He was taking old parts and building guitars and selling them to show people his work. So maybe that leads to him teching a gig later on, or getting someone's guitar collection to show up to his garage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Ace does. He's built a couple of guitar cabs and or amps, a couple of guitars, and it makes it it makes it better for him to do that. So he knows it through and through.
One
He's
of the first things
reverse engineer these things.
one of the very first things I did with my first guitar, was I took all the strings off.
Mhm.
I took it completely apart. I took all the screws and I pulled the pick guard off. And the only thing I didn't take apart was those two wires that went to the input jack. But I like took it all apart.
Yeah.
I like took the neck off, everything, and I put it back together.
Yeah.
My dad and I worked on cars, right? So it was so natural, and
Yeah.
it seemed it wasn't a whole car. It was just two pieces of wood and some screws, and a
Yeah.
piece of plastic,
Yeah, it's not that hard. But you do need to know. So like, yeah, kind of what we're talking about being a, pro level. Sometimes you're gonna have a bass tech. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're gonna share a bass tech with the drum tech, or a tech with the drummer. So knowing your equipment is should be at the top of your priority list. However, if you get a really big gig, there's going to be a really awesome tech that can take care of everything that you need. So you take it how you want to,
and I've
but
also had
I'd
to
rather be informed.
I like it's to my own detriment, right? Like when someone doesn't know their stuff on a big tour, like the tech will pick up the slack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if I didn't know really my bass rig, or if I like sucked at hooking it up and couldn't tune my bass for shit,
Mm-hmm.
um, then my tech would pick up the slack. But me being who I am with the way I am with gear, I like it. I take it apart, I fix it, I use it, right? I just know my way around it. I get it. It's like I'm Mr. Tinkerton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because of that, I can do. I like to do my stuff. I take care of my stuff. My shit is done. And what's awesome about that is when you're in the scenario like you just brought up, where you're a bassist and your drummer, and maybe on the Nita Strauss tours we have one tech,
Yeah.
whole band.
Mm-hmm.
So much of that show relies on the person whose name is on the banner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just gonna.
Mm-hmm.
It does, right? Um, the more that we can do as musicians and really know our stuff, if I can do my own setups and my own intonations and everything like that, and then I can have all that stuff done while the tech's running around doing the lights and the drums and the this and the that. If I am done with my stuff and I can lend my hand to helping him with the lights, or hooking up Nita's pedals, or tuning the guitar, or anything, that's when you get a show. Like, I can't stress this enough. Something I really, really, really learned, and something I love about your band, is that you just need to have all the cogs of the same wheel.
Yes.
Right? You just need to all be cogs on the same wheel.
Yeah.
I've had issues with that in bands, I do sometimes feel like I'm a cog on a different wheel.
This is a huge part of being a pro level player is you have to be part of the same team. Now, there are pro level players or pro level bands out there that have been together for many, many years that don't even sleep on the same bus. But when those bands disband, you know why. When they don't come together for 10 years, you know why. And
It's
so,
hard. It's hard when you're on different ideals. You know, I've tried to gel with people that I just feel, I don't know, can't do it. I'm
yeah,
trying, you know, and sometimes it doesn't line up. And it sucks when you love those people, right? And then you get to this scenario. You're like, how many dude, any band that's broken up, anyone that's had a band that's broken up knows that at one point or another, you absolutely love those dudes in that band. And then
yeah,
when that band breaks up, I mean, you may still love them, but I don't know, haven't talked
yeah.
to them in a couple of years, you know, like,
Yeah, and if those bands come back together and you have different crew on there, I mean, it's so ancestral, the music industry, that you don't want to be on anybody's bad side, and you don't want to create too much chaos, because the word gets around and people know who you are, and you don't get asked, back to join. So it's just best on those pro level gigs to, the attitude is a huge part of it. The hang. Nobody wants to hang out with a butthead.
right. I'm half guilty of that sometimes too, because I am so damn passionate.
Mhm.
Like, I want to be pro level to a fault sometimes.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like for real. When it comes to this journey, I've been an overachiever since day one, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, and that's hard. That's hard sometimes, you know, like, and so like one of these things is when you want to be pro level, you have to work with as many people as possible. And so one of those things that I'm talking about right now, right, is that when you work with as many people as possible, you start to understand the types of personalities that you can work with.
Yeah.
If you do have issues with someone and you don't align with their thoughts, you can come to common ground and realize that you can't change that person, and you can either accept them and work with them and disagree and move on, or walk away. You know what I mean? Um, Walk away to maybe jam another day, you know, but you have to jam with as many people as possible. You have to play as often as possible. And you really just have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I have this he's now my guitar player in my other band. His name's Zaki Ali. He plays guitar for Kalias, but he played drums in my band Darkness Descends, and he plays drums with me for Enzo Amore. Sorry, plays guitar with me for Enzo Amore. Um, we have this timing. We don't always agree on business views of responsibilities. He's a lot more laid back. I'm a lot more aggressive about everything. Like, but when we come together, it's fucking it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Um, even in like certain with certain like rough times, like the other night we were at rehearsal, we're so locked in that our drummer was like, "What song do you want to play?" And he's like, I don't know. I feel like we should play. And then he just started playing. And at that exact moment, him and I both started playing the exact same song. We were exactly in time. We just have this thing
Yeah.
that no matter what, like, we get it. You know, even if we don't agree, we get it. He
Yeah.
gets it that I get it, and I get it that he gets it. We
Yeah.
just get it differently,
Yeah.
right?
Well, like, so I mean, like, if you're touring with somebody, you're with them constantly. So you just kind of have to get people, like, where the parameters are of getting on their nerves and not getting on their nerves, because everybody's personality is different.
Well, if
You
you're
all,
building a band, though, if you're building a band, right, you're building up a band versus joining a band, right? Once the launch date happens and the tour is booked and you're on the tour, that's like that's the easy peasy sailing. And like with all that hard work that has to go into, that's actually the easy job. So much of the harder job was the 5 years before that.
yeah,
You know, was the 5 years of auditioning and writing and recording and releasing and promoting and, you know, and royalties and managers and producers and studios and demos and arguments and band dues and vans and one-offs. Like, hello, before the tour ever happens, there's 5 years of hell. Easy.
Easy.
Easy. Yeah.
Easy.
You know how many goddamn tickets a band has to sell their soul to play on these shit shows at local
I do.
for big bands for the
I
first
do.
5 years
I
before
know
they
exactly how many.
Yeah, I know. And and in some of those bands, dude, I got band members. I don't want to give no one away. But I got band members of other bands that have like what I imagine they just have a box of tickets they never sold. like there's like in their sock drawer, there's just like unsold tickets
So
from the
many times
Soulfly show.
I've given away because I just wanted to give the venue the money so we could be booked again. Like it's a racket.
Dude, it's a rat race. It's a rat race. It absolutely, the world is pay to play, but it's not pay to play in a bad way. I hate it when bands get so upset about this pay to play shit. And it's like, no, dude, listen, you have to not suck.
Mm-hmm.
They want like you having to pay to play. It's like if no one wants to come see you, you have to make them come want to see you.
Yeah.
That's
If
part
you're
of our job.
Yeah, and if you're a good band, you shouldn't have any problem. I never had problems selling tickets. I mean, every now and then there were like I'd have to sell 5, and it'd be like, well, eventually somebody's gonna want these tickets, so I'll buy them, and then I just have to,
I never have a hard time meeting my ticket quotas.
Yeah.
To the point where some of my friends don't ever want to come to another show again. I've sold them so many.
I think the hardest part of if you run the band, which I did in some cases, it all falls on you. So if my band members aren't selling the tickets, then I have to pick up the slack. Or if you're in charge of the ticket selling and you have one band member that just refuses to do it, then it falls on the other band members,
or one band member who not only doesn't sell tickets, but then doesn't bring them to the show to turn them in. So you have to cover them out of your own pocket, where you could have just at least had the promoter give you a slap on the wrist, but they didn't come back. So now you either have to like talk the promoter out of like making you pay for said bundle of tickets.
Yeah. And honestly, that could throw a person out of a band. If you're really if you're a hardworking band,
creates tension at the very least,
and you're really trying to make it in your musician circle and your town music scene, you need the support from the people who are in your band the most. The if you guys don't support each other, how is anybody else supposed to support you? So,
and it's hard because, right, like we're all in one form or another, we're all broken. Like all musicians, we're all broken, dude. Like
nobody's broken.
No, and not in a bad way, but like
we have
listen, you have to be broken to see a goal as hard as this, and to understand that you can, as long as you're running hard enough, fast enough, you can smash through those obstacles. Like you have to be broken to see an obstacle and realize, oh, it's not really an obstacle. I just got to do this and I'm going to get it. Like that's a mess. Like the average person doesn't do that.
To play the blues, you got to get your heart broken.
I'll tell you, the last 7 years of my life, it's like my touring life started at the same time that I suffered my greatest losses.
Yeah.
And so I went through 2 traumatic things side by side.
Mm-hmm.
And like you really have to rise up or fall.
Oh yeah. When I got the phone call for Zepparella, I was in one of the worst places of my life, living in like one of the worst places in Dallas. Yeah, getting stuff stolen out of my vehicle. Like it was the worst. And I still had to put a smile on my face and go to work every day and then go on tour and do this audition. It's like I had to pick myself up, and it's all, and it's done.
Yeah, and most people, like, they'd get a good job and they'd like keep that job.
Mm-hmm.
I would get these really great truck driving jobs for all these different companies doing paving and stuff like that, um, driving. I have a Class A CDL, and the reason why I don't really drive a truck too much anymore is because I come with a disclaimer: will leave for tour when necessary.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's another part of our industry is that we have to find ways to make it work when we're at home, and then all of a sudden, oh hey, Wednesday I have to leave for a tour, I'm sorry, or in 6 weeks I've got to leave for this 10-day tour. It's just
I
it's so
have
hard.
I have a phenomenal friend slash boss. His name is John Leonti of Leonti Recycling in Waldwick, New Jersey. You want to talk trash? Call Leonti Recycling. I love that tagline. I don't care.
Yeah.
But dude, when I'm home from tour,
uh,
I can call him up and get some shifts.
yeah.
It's so much like the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
It's so, like,
I don't think I've
when you come back from the gig and you need your job, like we all have our jobs that we can usually rely on, and you have to build up this world. I'm telling you, in the nicest of ways, that means we're broken. I had an opportunity to work for the Teamsters, so I drove a float in the Thanksgiving Day parade for 5 years. I only actually drove in the parade one year, but I drove like the floats into the city, and we were like all like part of the crew for 4 of those years. But when it came time to like for them, like, oh, you're gonna like, you know, join this and like do what you got to do. I would talk to the guys there, and like they would tell me these stories about how they'd spend like $5,000 on this like Paris vacation for their entire family and everything. And then a job comes up and they're like, the family goes without them.
Yeah.
Bro,
Yeah.
I, I don't operate like that. Like, no, it's like, I would look at that opportunity and be like, hey, sorry, sir, I can't take this job because I'm going to be a musician.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Which is, I think, the hard part that everybody says, it's hard to make it because you are balancing constantly. Like, what do I do when I'm not touring?
If you have a spouse and you're trying to be a musician and they don't get it, good luck
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Um,
Good luck with that.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. I mean, you got to be and that puts so much stress. So you're trying to get the job. You're trying like I've been in this position, trying to get the job, and you're trying to make sure everything is like they see you as the person you really feel that you are instead of all the bullshit that you're having to deal with at home. And you're trying to walk through the door with a big smile on your face and be a good hang and play the parts right, but you just got to fight with somebody, yesterday about not to spend enough time with them. It's hard. It's really hard. And then when you get the job and then you have to leave every other weekend or every other month, or for 3 months out of, every 6 months,
I
it's
left for tour
hard.
once for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the last day of that tour, got hired by another band at that show and didn't come home on the day I was supposed to come home and left for another 6 weeks. And then that was like caused the final straw of a breakup. And then, wound up moving to the other side of the country. Like, it's a crazy life. It's a crazy life. You can't predict it,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
like I thought I was just going on tour for 6 weeks. Next thing you know, it was 3 months. And on top of that, I wasn't coming back to New Jersey. I was going to live in LA. Like,
Yeah.
that's just the way life pans out, like there's multitude of reasons for all that happening, but our lives tend to be so chaotic that these situations present themselves.
Yeah.
Like if we had the stable, I wouldn't have made the mistakes that I've made in my life if I was living a stable life. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sorry, but the rock and roll gods tempt you with the devilish treats every day, like they really do.
Yeah, you have your, I think everyone has their own personal journey, obviously, of how they made it or they got to where they were. And
term
along this
that
journey,
term
it's
made it.
yeah, made it. Yeah, made it,
I was
or
at the
like
I was at the food store the other day, And this kid goes to me. He's like, "What do you do?" I had a mask on. He just like saw my tattoos. He's like, "What do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I play guitar. I teach guitar, whatever." And like we did our interaction. He goes, "Oh, man, hope you make it."
Yeah, yeah. I know it's
What?
weird. It is so
Like
weird. I guess
what?
they
What?
use that.
The term "made it" used to be like your record contract.
Yeah,
Those
like you got a record contract. I guess now it's more
you
like
haven't been able to quote unquote make it since like '94, dude. You know, like up from now on, it's just get the gig, do the work. You know, like
it's a weird
you're doing it.
you're doing it. That's
Yeah,
it.
you're not. There's no more make it.
Nothing
Now you're
makes it
doing
anymore.
it.
Just doing it.
Yeah.
That's true, and that's what we've been talking about with the book. You're always talking about the disruption mindset. It's like you've
It's
got
like right here. Do you see that? It's right here.
you have to
These are all my
think about,
all
yeah,
my passes are my oh look.
yeah. You have to think about what's the future is and what you're going to do in the future because things change so much. I mean, look at COVID. COVID completely wiped out our industry as far as what we were
It
doing.
wiped out the lazy ones.
Yeah, it's true. It wiped out the ones that weren't going to be able to do
It
much.
doesn't matter what time. Like I watch Gary V all the time, and especially with the lockdown, Gary Vaynerchuk. If those of you who don't know him, you should totally check him out if you're into any kind of entrepreneurial or business aspect of brand building, business building, working in 2020 and 2021. Gary Vaynerchuk on all things. It's Gary VEE, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. He is a phenom when it comes to marketing. And I was watching his videos non-stop trying to figure out what moves to make. And you know who wasn't? All the other weekend warriors, man. They didn't care. They were just like either sitting home collecting their checks or like or selling their axes to Guitar Center. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? The rest of us do things like, I don't know, start a podcast. Let's share our knowledge. Let's interact with people. Let's
Yeah.
come down to a different level. Let's go this way. Let's go that way. Let's try this. Let's do an album. Let's do a live stream. Like, you know, let's start a Patreon page. Anything. Let's do lessons. Let's do this more. Let's, you know, a lot of artists started Patreon page and Cameo. Like there was a lot of businesses that thank God for them. Thank
Yeah.
God for Patreon. Thank God for Cameo. Thank God for YouTube.
Twitch.
And not that there's too many musicians on it, but like things like OnlyFans, right? Like my one buddy Enzo Amore, he is the only professional wrestler with an OnlyFans, and it's not for nudity
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's
It's
for
it's a wrestling school.
yeah.
He's doing like wrestling, right? And like teaching people wrestling through OnlyFans.
Well, Kiki Wong, guitar player from Visual War, she's doing, her guitar shenanigans. She's just the cutest little girl, and she's my age, but she's just the cutest girl, and she does these little shred, this fun little shred videos, and she does, that on OnlyFans, and I think
Yeah,
she's
and it's great. You know, obviously that platform in specific gets abused for certain kinds of stuff,
right,
so it's rough. But like Trivium and Alicia
Alicia, yeah,
from Vigil of War,
yeah.
she's on Twitch all the time doing stuff. You know, like I love.
She's the
I
reason I got on Twitch was to see the interview she did with Gretchen.
right.
And then I thought, well, this is kind of cool, so I stuck around, and now I have my own Twitch account.
Right. Yeah, I have a Twitch account too. There's I will. This is a great time to bring this up. I
Yeah.
am going to be doing stuff with my roommate where we're going to for a certain Patreon level tier. Once things pick up, I want to play video games with people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I play Call of Duty Modern Warfare
Yeah.
and Black Ops Cold War every day that I can.
Well, does it? What's the guy that I think he's a Norwegian guy that does the will it chug? What's the guy? Nita was on his program. He's a YouTube guy, and he just talks about gear and music and stuff. And I don't know. Anyways, that's what he does. He's a musician, does all his musician stuff, And then on his Discord, he plays games with all of his followers that play games as well.
Yeah, man, it's a great thing to do. I loved the first person I really saw doing it, where I saw like the biggest in the beginning, was Jason Mewes was playing Fortnite with people.
Okay.
You know, like, dude, Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, man, that dude his career dropped off, you know, because he was getting his life together. And when he came back with these movies, his like these people could have forgot about him, but he took this avenue, right, to come back in a unique way, and he was playing Fortnite with people. Like, that's great. Trivium plays video games with people. Like, I want to be able to do that. You know, in these times, you can't say the C word, by the way, otherwise YouTube messes with you. But in these times, I call this the second coming of Napster. Holly and I were talking before this podcast, and we're going to do a whole episode about this. But I consider this, you know, the second coming of Napster for the music industry, where when Napster hit, we lost all of our record sales and bands had to get creative. This thing hit, and those of us who aren't lazy had to get creative and work harder. You know, none of us know who did it right throughout. We'll find out over the next few years. We'll find out, you know, as time goes on, who navigated this thing right. But yeah, it's, you know, and that's kind of hard, right? So like, that's something I'd like to address too with these times. A lot of these points that we're bringing up when we talk about jamming with people, that's a lot harder nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But Audacity is a recording digital audio workstation, or DAW, and it is free. And if you have a laptop, you can get that and buy a $50 used interface, and you can track stuff and you can send it to your drummer, and your drummer can do the same thing. And if he has a MacBook or anything like that, they come with GarageBand for free. He can record that and send it back to you. You guys can still play together.
Yeah.
It's harder. It's not as fun. It takes more work. But if you get yourself used to this, you can collaborate with people.
Whoever, yeah. There are even apps now that you can collaborate with people. You just get on and
Yeah.
It's great.
Or going live with someone on Instagram, you know, like joining someone's live stream, anything like that. These collaborations. Right now we're like 3,000 miles away, but yet we're able to collaborate because we've done the necessary work to, you know, we Holly and I did like 5 to 7 calls and everything over this, working out bugs, trying to figure out what mics we're going to use, what this we're going to use, how we're going to figure out the background. You got to just put the time in. And it's hard to collaborate with someone in any capacitation now.
Yeah.
But you can. Right now, like one of my bands that I have, we still get together. The drummer wears a mask. You know, I don't care because I had the thing. I already had the thing. I had the thing. So
yeah,
wear your mask.
Yeah.
I had the thing. It's gone.
So, I mean, the subjects that we have today are kind of interesting because we're talking about pro level, and then we're also talking about internet stuff. But the thing is,
because it's pro level now. That's why I was trying.
Yeah, now you got to be pro level with the internet.
Right. How much have we had to learn? Right. How many different?
I had to build my own website. I built two other websites just for fun, just to see how to build a website and to see which platform I wanted to build it on. And then I had to build my own website, and I still do everything on my own website. And
what's your website for our listeners?
hollywestmusic.com. And I have to control everything that goes on through that website, which is not that much harder than running a Patreon. Or
I'm a little lazy about my website.
Yeah, but
I've needed to rewrite my bio for like, I don't know, a couple months now.
Yeah, I find that I just need to sit down for an hour or two and just work on stuff. You know, just because something's misspelled here, something's in the wrong place on, this format or whatever. And I just find it better to be like, okay, I just got to go spend an hour looking at stuff and making
I
sure.
usually wait until there's like a laundry list of crap that has to get done on like my last I just recently updated my website, everything except for the bio.
Mm.
Which, to be honest, my bio is very up to date other than the last 3 tours that I was on being mentioned in it, which is kind of why I haven't really worried, because it's adding 3 gigs of my resume to my bio wasn't, I guess, I didn't want to just add it on to the end. I was gonna like do something with it if I'm gonna do anything.
Yeah.
But I completely trimmed the fat. Like I used to, that's another thing. Like being professional nowadays is small, compact, simple.
Yeah.
My website in the beginning, it had like 50 different pages, like I had a whole bunch of different stuff, different tabs, different things, different that. I trimmed the fat down. Yeah, I still have like 5 or 6 tabs, but they're like specialized and focused,
Yeah.
and trimmed the fat. I got rid of this, got rid of that, brought this in, like
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a lot. And like so that's also, it also takes practice. Like that's another thing that we'll talk about, like being pro level. You just told our listeners that before you built your website, you built a couple others to practice, to work it out, to figure it out. That's no different than preparing for any professional gig, right? Like this is one thing that for me is a personal conundrum, because we are Base Cafe with Holly and Dean.
Mhm.
But if you wanted to listen to our podcast with a clear mind and just take everything that we're talking about with music as a metaphor, everything we're talking about is becoming a business professional. If everything that we're using music as an example of, if you viewed that as a metaphor, it could be for countless industries. It really is. If you want to be a writer, you would just have to follow, use this as a metaphor and follow these tactics. Instead of learning
Yeah.
music theory, you would learn English composition and flow, and be hip. Instead of knowing your scales, you would know your parts of speech. Like
I was a hairdresser for 18 years, colorist and cutting, and I mean, you have to know a lot of stuff, and not only that, but you have to know a lot about the body, because hair grows from a person, and so if it's growing in a bad way, you need to know why.
my
Uh,
son's mother is my best friend, and she's been a stylist um as long as I've known her, since
mhm.
high school, over 20 years.
Yeah, I started in high school.
And
Um,
I'll tell you, that is a very easy thing where to figure out like life's problems.
mhm.
Me as a musician and her as
Hairstylist.
yeah, hairstylist. Sorry, idiot. But her as a hairstylist, um, we get to use a lot of these examples as metaphors back and forth. The same way I am as a teacher with dealing with my clients, she is with her clients.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
there's these same similar properties, and even
absolutely.
now, the salon industry is changing.
Mhm.
The salons were the first things to close,
Yeah.
and so there's opportunities. And we from the very beginning of all this stuff, I've been trying to talk with her about trying to take examples of what musicians have been doing and like pitching them to her as ideas that maybe serve a
Yeah.
future customer, right? That it's all universal if we really want to focus at, we're
Absolutely.
talking about an industry specific thing, but these key
Well,
points.
yeah, everyone started in the industry not knowing anything about that industry, and the people who rose to the top of the industry just went through all that stuff and figured out how to manipulate or maneuver through it the best way that
Punk
they
rock tours are like working in the mailroom, dude.
could.
You're learning the ropes on easy/hard mode, like smaller scale and increased difficulty at that rate. But
Yeah.
so huge thing is your attitude. I myself have been guilty of not always having the most and greatest PMA. I'm very passionate. passionate to a fault. It has currently served me more than it's hindered me.
Mm-hmm.
But just like all things, if you don't hone it in, it will hurt you more than it will help you.
Absolutely.
I focus on being self-aware too. Like there's one thing of like just being an awesome person, but there's another thing about being a real person and understanding your faults and
Yeah.
working on them, actively
Yeah.
evolving yourself.
Yeah. I've seen some musicians that went down the really bad road of, drugs and alcohol, and, several years later they wake up and go, oh, I just pissed a few years away, like I need to get it together. And then they do, and then they go off to do great things. And a lot of, I mean, we've seen that in the rock and roll industry, of course, time and time again. These big name artists who are sober now, and it was a party back then, and yeah, it was a party back in the 80s, but nowadays you don't really have that same kind of thing going on in the industry.
I'm the
It's
Johnny
still
Ramone
there,
of
but
band responsibilities. I really am. And I try not to be to
mm,
my heart's content, but I
mm,
promise you that it's just something I can't stand. If someone isn't doing what they're supposed to do,
mm,
it's like you've personally like stepped on my pinky toe.
yeah.
It's that's what it is. It's like you just purposely looked at me in the eyes and went,
Well, you're still at work, even though it's a party and you are the party, you're still at work.
people don't understand for someone like me, and I'm sure you and any other level of musician who's trying to make something out of themselves, maybe not established, right? But the one who's trying to climb the ladder. I'm trying to climb the ladder,
Mm-hmm.
Um, depending on who you ask, you're at different rungs on the ladder. If you ask me, I'm still down here, man. But if you ask some of my friends, I'm like all the way up here, but it's all about perspective. I'm just trying to climb this ladder of this thing that I love, just like you. And with that, just comes like this immense amount of responsibility. And I don't punch out.
Yeah.
I've never, this is something that I like. If you're in one of my bands and you're watching this right now, I will actively admit this.
Yeah.
I don't know when to punch out. I picked up my guitar at 13, punched in, and I've been working overtime ever since. That's right. That makes me hard to deal with. That makes a weekend warrior or someone who's not someone who punches out has a hard time working with me.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But for sure, man, like, I don't know,
Well, I mean, that's
turn that
probably
switch
better.
on.
That's better than, phoning it in.
For sure. For sure. And because of that, other band members that I've been in bands with haven't gone on to expand things because they were phoning it in.
Yeah.
It's rough, right? It's like, this is a blessing and a curse, is being able to work so hard that you make moves, but also working so hard that, you trip.
Yeah.
You can run so fast
Yeah.
or try to run so fast that you fall on your face.
Yeah.
For me, all that matters is that you get up and keep running and
Yeah.
maybe try and run faster again,
Learn.
maybe
You'll
fall
learn.
on your face again.
You'll learn. Yeah, and I think you put a really good point. We're all on our own journey, and we're all going up this ladder of success. However, tall our ladder is, it's
Ladder, pyramid,
yeah,
vector,
whatever
whatever
we're
you
trying
want.
to do, and we
Black
really
hole.
we just need to make sure that we're being true to ourselves as a musician and being true to ourselves as a person, and not trying to make it life harder on anybody else. And eventually,
Practice.
in practice, and you'll get there. And then when you get up there, you get help from people like Ace Bergman, or people who are like these, or Hoogie.
Yeah, and Hoogie, right? And so, but we're going to get into that interview with Ace, right? And
Mhm.
so, one of the things I'd like to touch on right before we jump into that is like making sure that you have the right gear, right? Like we spoke about this. When you want to be a pro level bass player, you have to have semi pro gear. Some
Mhm.
key points that Holly and I have talked about is like not only just having your bass, right?
Yeah.
maybe having 2 or 3.
Yeah, at least.
Maybe if you're running 3 or 4 pedals and you have a power supply, each one of those pedals also has a brand new 9-volt battery in it in case the power supply doesn't work or reach the front of the stage. You can unplug the power supply and get through the set.
Yep.
Right? Making sure that you have not only your 2 cables, but 2 more in case those 2 go out.
Yeah.
Or for my tours, I always, this is a little hint to how chaotic Dean is. When I run a wireless, I always have a cable right next to my amp that is like, the end is sitting by the input jack. It's like routed. So like if you're going to wrap it around your handle, you wrap it around your handle. You're going to put it under the head, whatever. It's sitting there right by the input jack. And then the other part of the cable is like ready to just be grabbed, plugged in and moved. Like a less than 2 second change from wireless, to wire. Dumb stuff like that. It sucks that I brought it up before, but like some of the stuff you don't learn until you do it and then fall on your face, right? You don't learn that you need at least a 4x10 or 6x10 or an 8x10 for a gig until you show up with a combo amp and get laughed at.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know that you need to have 2 basses until you're playing the biggest show of your life and you break a string and you, in front of a record exec, have to sit on stage and put a bass string on your own bass. You know what I mean? And maybe not win that battle of the bands. You don't need,
and,
you don't
and
know
not
you
only
need.
that, but if you're putting a new string on bass, one new string, those other 3 strings are going to sound a lot different.
I've literally watched it happen with the band that was on Century Media Records.
Sucks more than anything. And that is one thing you don't know until you do it.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I feel so indebted to the lovely people at Ibanez is that having these 2 twin basses, I got really lucky, and they're sequential serial numbers. So even like all of my guitars, everything I do, it's all been like, I try and standardize it, right? I play all Ibanez 6 strings and all Ibanez 7 strings because I got like a really good 7 string that I really loved. And then I slowly started modeling everything after that. So like my 6 strings are basically like my 7 string, but scaled down. That's what happened. And like the 7 strings, I got a mess of them because I was in a band and I had 2 different tunings. And because of that, I had one tuning that we played 5 songs on, and another tuning we played 2 songs on. Or played with 2 songs. And so the 2-song tuning, drop C sharp on my 6 strings, I had 2 guitars. And the other tuning, drop B, I had 3 guitars.
Are these metal bands?
Yeah. That was a black metal band. But yeah, so like I would be the dingus who showed up to the show that we sold 4 tickets to with 5 guitars.
But nothing's gonna go wrong.
Yeah, like there was only one show. There was one show at Darrow Chemical Company. It was Joe Vass's birthday, and it was on the very first tour where I was filling in on the last few dates of the tour. But it was Joe Vass's birthday, and I got so drunk. The bartender got us hammered. She kept pouring shots of Rumpelmans. Like Rumpelmans is our drink, but we usually
she's the bartender.
Yeah, she was a great bartender. We also didn't pay for a lot of those shots, but I'll tell you that sucked to get that many shots for free before you go on of Rumpelmans. Like we could have done that many shots of Jack Daniels. We could have done that many shots of Jaeger, and it would have been like, a punk rock show. Yeah. We had so many shots of Rumpelmans that it was a punk rock show. Like we were here. I had my guitar with me, and I was just on that tour as a guitar tech, but I brought 2 guitars as a guitar tech on tour just to keep myself busy. But the other guitar player brought 3. And when he left, I had 5 guitars at my disposal. That one show, I got down to the fifth guitar because I broke so many strings. And I was the former guitar tech, now turned guitar player. So I just kept grabbing a guitar. Like I had to grab a guitar and put it back. Grab a
Green
guitar and put what?
Was this green jelly?
It might as well have been. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was Darrow Chemical Company. That was on The Return of the Touring Dead in 2013.
Wow, I wish the
I'm
Return
pretty.
of the Touring Dead would come back.
Yeah, we did. We did. We came
I
back
could
for the Natural Born Grillers tour next.
well,
But yeah, like, and so that's the thing. Like, you had to be. It's like this, man.
yeah, gotta have it. Gotta have it. So yeah, you learn all those little things, and then what's cool about a really awesome tech is they already know all those little things too. So your worlds kind of collide. And you know, when you're in a big, when you're a big tech and you're working for these big name people, you have your own box that goes with you too. Like you have your own.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool. You have your
tech
own rig.
box.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like these guys just come along with the, the artists. Like they come along with their own gear and their
The
own.
pro guys show up with like a snap-on toolbox looking thing that has, compartments for guitars and parts and strings and picks and lights and tuners and all the stuffs.
Yeah, and even if you're, only if you're teching and you're just a bass tech, I mean, it can be pretty laid back, which is great, but it can also be pretty hectic. So
It's
it
one of
just
my
depends on
favorite
who you're
things.
working for and
One of my
what you're
favorite
doing.
things about a show is setting up Guitar World. Like
Guitar World?
I like showing up to a venue
Yeah.
and being like, all right, so where are we gonna put Guitar World?
Guitar
And like, yeah, Guitar World. And on these tours, like I've gotten so used to it from other bands that now like I just do it. Like I know that I don't necessarily have the authority, but because I've been doing it on so many tours, I stick with the audacity because I love how comfortable it makes me feel. But whenever we get into a venue, I don't care if I got to take a section and rope it off.
Mhm.
I don't care if we take a section of the floor and rope it off. I really don't care. Like, I just always beg and plead with the club owners and let them know, like, listen, we want to give you the best show. So just give us this space to make sure that whoever the tech is has room to work. Because if you break a string and the tech doesn't have room, like if you have to get that guitar back, like if you only have two guitars and you break a string on a guitar or a bass, two basses and you break a string, that tech's going to replace that string and put it back in the rack.
Yeah.
If that tech doesn't have room to put it back in the rack, to get to the rack, to set up his like station, we're talking like, club shows, right?
Yeah, he's got to have him.
Yeah, he's got to have his spot. And it sucks, it sucks to sometimes do that, and when you have like a club owner too, like I got yelled at by a Canadian club owner who lost their shit on me because I asked someone if I could set up Guitar World there. They're like, yeah, and she came over and flipped it, like, but I think that stuff's really important, like, and that comes from practice. I didn't know what Guitar World was until I started like touring with pro level techs, and they were like, nah, this right here, see this pink tape, my buddy Drew, stage crew.
Yeah.
Like, see this pink tape?
Guitar World.
This is my world.
Yeah.
Over there, that's your world. Don't come in my world. Like he will scream at people.
Well, it's true. You have to have your room, and when you are backstage, you see those lines of tape, all the gaff tape and everything. Everybody has their little spot.
Guitar techs or techs are a lot like bass players, right? They get no respect. So it's like they're just as much of an important part of the show as every other member. But like, they have to fight for their rights, unfortunately, in some of these smaller venues, right?
My favorite thing that Takumi, who's been on tour with Prince and now he's Gavin's tech, he has this trash can. I hope nobody will catch on. Okay, so he has this trash can and he labels it not a trash can. and it's actually a trash can, but it's only his trash can.
Right.
And at the end of the show, he takes his trash and he puts it up, and then he fills a trash can full of other stuff that he needs, you know. But it's like kind of part of the. I thought it was just really funny.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes you have to do that too.
you learn tricks along the way. Like, you do learn sometimes that if you put like a sign that says no drinks on something,
It's not gonna happen.
that you leave and you come back and there's a goddamn ring on it, on that piece of paper or on that amp, or there's a goddamn ring from someone who put their drink down and then like sat there, smoked a cigarette, and then walked away or something. Like without fail. Like that happens every time, right? Like I have all these no drinks things, and I'll smack them off.
It doesn't even matter what kind of stage you're on unless it has barricades too. If your stage doesn't have barricades, you can almost guarantee you there's going to be a drink on that stage.
Dude, festivals, I don't care. You know how many people have credentials at a festival? More people than the bands and the crew, because it's every band, every crew, and every band's friends.
Yeah.
And they're, and every band's manager, and every band's this, and every band's girlfriend, and every band's wife.
All these people backstage.
Yeah, and every band's husband. It doesn't matter. There's just, when you watch Korn at a show, man, look at how many people are on the side of the stage, dude. Look at how many people are on the side.
Sometimes they have double deckers to the sides of the stages because there's so many people that can have access to go and watch. That's crazy. Yeah. So Ace, his last show was, I think his first show that he ever toured with was like a punk metal band. They toured all over the place, and then his last big tour he did was with Slash. And so Slash plays, pretty big venues, a lot of House of Blues, those have big stages and festivals and things like that. And but Ace has seen it all. He started out as he lived in a punk rock house, and he had this metal show in LA, and then he was a guitar player, and this metal band, and then he started working for, friends of his, and then all of a sudden got on tours, and then just toured with some of the biggest people. So I've actually been able to, when he lives in Vegas now, he lived in LA for a long time, and every time I come to LA,
those two are interchangeable for crew workers. I got news for you. Like every good guitar tech either lives in LA or Vegas, or if he lived in Vegas, he lives in LA, and if he lived in LA, now he lives in Vegas. Like it's because they're both great hubs.
Matt Storm's drum tech is out there.
Dude, when you're a good tech and you're working a lot, when you come home, you want it to be somewhere that's, where you can do things.
Yeah, exactly.
No one wants to be home from tour in December and be in New York City. Nobody. Yeah. They'd rather be in Vegas or in Nashville or in LA.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But when he lived here, he worked a lot at Mates.
So did he? I assume that somewhere in his career, he definitely had gigs where he worked for tons of different bands, right? Like one of the things when you're coming up and like
as different techs too. He was a guitar tech. He's been a bass tech. He was a drum tech one time.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to fill the shoes, man. Like I've had guitar techs and drum techs that don't know how to play guitar or drums. Mm-hmm. It is what it is.
Exactly.
But to be a professional, you just have to do things. You have to do lots of things. You have to do as many things. You have to always say yes. A huge thing that I stand by is the best ability is availability, right? Just
yes.
Say yes to the gig, take the gig. You have to get all these things. Before this dude could be Slash's guitar tech, I guarantee you he had to do guitar teching gigs in like air-conditioned clubs, and then 130-degree festivals on the stage, and then like studio sessions and setting stuff up. You have to cover so many different bases before you can get that pro gig. Because if you get hired by Slash, you got to go to a festival in Germany, and you don't know what to do to make that guitar not have a neck that looks like this. You're not going to get that call again. And some other dude from some other band is going to come over and save the day and get a double payday.
Yeah. No, he did mention a lot about like there, there's bands that have like a that are these techs are kind of grandfathered into these jobs, and there are a lot of people like Al from Clutch. He's been with them since like I don't know, probably day one.
You
I
become a silent member of the band. Like,
You're the silent member of the band, yeah. And I think what's great about Ace's experience is that he becomes really good friends with these people. So Slash is his buddy, and he's told me funny stories about him and Slash before, and it's just so cool that he gets to do that. But it's really awesome about knowing that okay, so here he hangs out with the best guitar player, that everybody would probably say, everybody knows Slash, right? So he still is not going to pick up Slash's guitar in Slash's room and on Slash's rig and sound like Slash. It's
yeah,
Slash.
not gonna happen. You can try damn hard. Like a good tech, will
Uh,
figure out one or two riff techniques
mhm,
where they can emulate something.
mhm.
It's usually a chug or a strum
Yeah.
or a chord
Mhm.
that they can do like that. It's usually one or two target things, like drum techs too. When you're a bass tech / drum tech, there's different ways to hit the drum. You have to learn. This is a big thing on my tours. The techs get their asses ripped over this during sound check. When you're teching for and doing sound check on the drums, you better be hitting the drums like the drummer.
Yeah,
If the drummer's a
exactly.
hard hitter, you have to hit it hard. If the drummer's a soft hitter, you have to hit it soft.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. They're,
It's like a vocalist going check,
yeah,
check, check, and then going and singing like Bruce Dickinson.
yeah. This doesn't happen.
That's not like that's
The
where
reason for
again
the,
the
yeah,
professionalism comes in.
the reason for the check is for the levels, but yeah, and some techs take over different jobs depending on the band they're working for. I know some really big bands that tour with just one tech, and the guy does everything. He does all the teching and front of house and lights. It's all encompassing, and I think
And that's dude, and that you can only do again with major experience. When you have to do something as crazy as front of house and stage tech, understand that in the moment of an emergency, you cannot get to the stage.
yeah,
Okay. And so like in those situations, like, we lost the tech on a tour. He had to go home or whatever, and we were waiting a couple days for one to come in. And we didn't have a tech. So I picked up the reins. I was playing bass. I picked up the reins. We had a system where when Nita had to switch out her guitar, she used to just take her guitar off, give it to the tech. When she'd go up to the mic, he would switch out guitars. Could we change tunings? Switch out guitars because like it was the one strap with the wireless, so it was just easier to switch the strap, right? You know what I mean? And I think the first tour she only had the one pack. She didn't have two packs. In that case, I was on the side of the stage. So I would set up the guitars. I would tune the guitars. I would have everything ready to go. She would walk over, hand it to me, go and talk to the crowd. I would go and switch it real quick and hand it right back to her. Like
mhm.
in that case, where our only other crew member is all the way over there,
Yeah,
you have to have a foolproof system
yeah,
and you have to run that. Like you have to let people know,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. We've had some interesting times on stage with Zepparello where Clem's drum set would mess up. One time we did
How does
the
a drum set mess up?
well, like she can kick through the kick drum.
Oh, yeah, like breaking a head.
Yeah, breaking a head or a snare or something just to change it out.
The pro
So we have
drummers, you know what they have, guys? They have
extra
their
one.
pre-tuned snare right there because the hard hitters, they
Yeah,
know what happens.
yeah.
They know
And
what
she
happens.
he has an extra snare usually, but when the kick goes through, you either have to turn it around or if you don't have an
Oh, you don't
extra
have a head.
head, you have to turn it around. But and that's what we had to do one time.
Oh,
But
yeah,
it
I
was
wouldn't have
like
even thought of that.
yeah, it was interesting, right? Um,
Most drummers will at least try to like at least hit the floor tom, do something, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, Yeah. So it was interesting. But then, and what we do is the girls and I, we started playing blues, and we just did the kick drum blues.
Dude, any time that that's amazing. That's exactly what you do. Like Nita, we ran a backing track, and like where we had, some of the others Symphonia stuff going on, and like sound clips and stuff. And like all of our in between song
Hmm.
like sounds, right?
Yeah.
If there was ever an issue with the backing track, like in our Nita Strauss show, the sound never stopped unless Nita was talking to the crowd.
Yeah.
There was even a couple times when there was like sounds going and she would talk and whatever. But if something happened with the laptop and she's the one that knew how to fix it, right? Because she's the one who built the session,
Yeah.
Kat would play
Yeah.
some piano parts.
Hmm.
Johnny might add in with guitar.
Yeah.
If there was times when they were having an issue with Josh's drum set or whatever, or there was some sort of a problem. I forget what it was, but it was happening like often, and it wasn't the computer. Um, Nita and Kat would do an impromptu jam.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just gonna jam. They're gonna pull out the time, and then the crew goes to work, and then we're good to go. Boom, back. Like that takes practice. That takes falling on your face
Yeah.
to know what to do in those scenarios.
Yeah.
So let's hear
What Ace
what
has.
you and Ace got to catch up about.
Awesome.
Take it away.
Drink. This is Base Cafe, so we drink while we while we talk. I got a new cup. Oh, there you go. Yeah, drink that. I got a new cup. Somebody, one of our fans gave us this.
Oh, nice. What are you drinking?
It's got the. I don't want to tip it over, but it's got the.
Yeah, don't pour it out.
Yeah, just put water all over. So are you still making your own making your guitar amps?
I've made 2, I think now. That was a couple of years ago. I had a lot of fun with it, and I started, going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And then I went on tour.
Yeah.
And then I moved and packed up all my amp stuff. And then, I didn't unpack it for about 2.5 years. And I could, I'm not a great amp designer. It was more of a hobby thing. And I'm really happy with the amps I've made. And I love them. But I would need a real amp designer to go through my designs and, be like, oh, this is great. Or you're going to hurt yourself. I'm surprised you didn't hurt yourself doing this. Or,
Yeah.
So
that being said, have you seen any big name artists use some really weird gear before on the road? Have you that you can recall?
I mean, ideally you want to use stuff, if I have my choice,
Mhm.
I would use this stuff that I could get easily and accessibly, because you need to find parts for things on the road. If you're touring with a Mellotron or something like that and it breaks in Topeka, you're screwed if that's what your show's hinging on.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I mean, like, artists will buy weird things, do weird things, have weird toys or tools, or Aerosmith, Steven Tyler plays, he has shakers that come out on stage for Sweet Emotion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you got to have, your shakers. So yeah, there's some weird things. I mean, it's all kind of turns into oatmeal in my brain, like what all I've seen and all that. I've been doing it so long, and when you're working, everything comes at you so fast, and you're in a new city every day. It's like you see something that you think you'll never forget on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, you're waiting for the Chinese police to let you go. So it's a weird life.
That's funny. Yeah, I had this conversation a long time ago because I did have an amp builder who wanted to finally build a bass amp, and he wanted me to be the first kind of prototype. He wanted to dial in my sound for the first kind of prototype, and I had a conversation with Bob Zilla from Damage Plan about
Hmm.
this, and he said, "Well, the guy was going to make me an amp too, but when you go out on the road, how are you going to get somebody to fix it? And how are you going to keep that tone if it blows up? You know?"
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's probably why you see a lot of big artists with bigger name brands, well named brands.
Yeah. The product support is definitely, and like I deal with it even with like big name artists, they'll find like a pedal or something that they want and they'll be like, hey, I need 10 of these. And I'll be like, hey, I'd like to get 10 of these. And the guy's like, I've only made 4 of them. I said, no, I need 10 of these and I need them all over the world or I can't use them. I can't, you need to have your show that you rely on needs to be ready to happen anywhere.
Mhm.
You gotta be able, like, that's why Marshalls, Fenders, Les Pauls,
Yeah,
Stratocasters. I
yeah,
can get I've got a Marshall sent to me in the middle of the Indian Ocean before. I can't do that with, just a boutique brand.
yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So if you're, let's say you're wanting to, or you have a tour where you don't have a lot of backup, like you don't have any, I don't know, you really go through tours that are like super professional. So a lot of
Um,
times, but things I guess go wrong. And do you run into problems where you just have to try and find the best solution?
oh yeah. And and I do smaller tours as well. Sometimes I tend to work with big name artists, but we'll do weird stuff where like, you know, especially one-offs where you throw some guitars on a plane and you call ahead and tell them what you expect to have,
Yeah.
and then you get there and you find out that they were just, telling you what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, that happens, I guess, with most tours or fly-in dates for sure. Fly-in dates, because you do a
Yeah.
lot of those too, and I think those are probably where your biggest problems would be.
Yeah. And you make it happen, and you have to be dynamic. You have to think on your feet. You have to know what'll work is what in a pinch. You have to, like, you know, make what you did to change be as transparent as possible. If you can't find if you can't find a chorus, find a flanger and turn it way the hell down and pretend like it's a chorus, or something like, make it work. Get something that sounds good enough and you're not really faking it, but you do what you got to do to get a show to happen. On a big tour like Guns N' Roses, we carried, you know, 60 people, and I had 20 something guitars and 8 or 10, 12 amps. I don't remember. Um, but yeah, and I like to carry as much stuff as I can feasibly get away with spare wise, but you know, sometimes you're flying, you have to leave your A rig in Europe and your B rigs in a shipping container, and you get booked to do a show a third place. So you cobble together whatever you have because somebody's willing to pay a lot of money to see you in Buenos Aires tomorrow. So you make it happen.
Yeah. Is there a common string company that you see mainly out there, or there's a couple of them, or just mainly just the big ones? Like something that kind of pops out, like super common strings, because we don't get to see that. Like we would be able to like go on interviews and listen to like what Duff, maybe Duff is endorsed with this company or so and so is endorsed with this company or whatever. But like, what do you see mainly out there?
People play their endorsements. Like if somebody says they're endorsing a certain brand, they'll almost certainly be playing that. Sometimes we'll get prototype strings, but like Slash has his new signature string set, which is, I'm sure, the same strings that he's using on stage. Yeah, and like you said, mostly I see the big manufacturers: Dunlop, D'Addario, Ernie Ball. With Slash, were Ernie Ball, of course, Dean Markley. Those are the main ones. And then people will try boutique strings. You'll see people be like, hey, some guy gave me these strings to check out and I really like them, and I'll put them on this guitar because, and we've done that with Slash. We did like the Cobalt strings were brighter than the strings we were using at the time. So we put them on a couple of darker sounding guitars to kind of, balance them out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and you do see smaller brands just because people like to wind their own strings, I guess, or start their own string company. So they're out there. Same like smaller guitars.
Yeah. Now I've had conversations with some people because I use DR strings and they're handmade strings, and I've had conversations with people, especially like at NAMM or just anywhere really, about other string companies that aren't hand wound. And do you find a difference? Like, do you know of anybody that's ever said anything about a difference?
I'm not sure how they hand wind their DR strings. The last DR artist I worked with would have been Dimmu Borgir in like 2009. I remember I liked their strings. I think I have some packs from back then. But as far as their hand winding process, I've actually never, I hate to say this, but I've visited every other manufacturer. I've never been to a string manufacturer to see how strings are actually
hand wound
made. I probably shouldn't cop to that. I should probably go right now.
Yeah.
And I've been meaning to, but strings is, like I've been to amp and guitar manufacturers because I reverse engineer guitars and amps. Strings are, I've never had to fix the string. You just put a new one on, or I've never had to build I've built guitars and amps and pickups and pedals, but I've never hand wound strings.
Now, do you
Seems like someone else could do that for me. It's like a lot of work.
Now, do you find a difference between some of the older bassists, the more classic rock kind of bassists that you've played or you've worked for, versus some of the newer sounding like music? Do you think that they have kind of a difference in, like, do they change their strings often or not, or do they use more like I guess the equipment? Do some of the newer bassists use a lot more effects and dial in a little bit different? Like, what do you see out there a lot?
The thing I see is that like they're really like all the old styles, you might call it, and old techniques and stuff. That's all still alive. I mean, there's people who play both young and old, that will replicate and duplicate. I mean, there's people still playing Vivaldi's music that was written 400 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's people still using pretty much, still rubbing chicken grease on their bass strings and still, doing all that old witchcraft so they sound like Jack Bruce.
Yeah.
And then there's people who are, trying to push the envelope, so to speak, and adding more strings to their bass and using a lot of effect, like Thundercat. He sounds like Steve Vai. He's like exploring all this new territory. So I think everything that has been done is being done, and I think there's people looking for new things to do, and I think that's great. So if you want, like, there's people who are learning how to play stand-up bass, like they're learning how to play Sing 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 or something.
Yeah.
Like it's the 40s. And then there's people who are buy the latest toy and take it apart and hook it up to the other latest toy to see what kind of super toy they can make. Like all bets are off. So, and like especially with now that people are playing in the digital realm,
Mhm.
You can manipulate sound all sorts of ways.
Yeah, you can do it, pretty much anything now. Like you don't even really need a tape machine unless you just want to be that nostalgic with it, right?
Yeah, unless you want a tape machine.
As you
I
want
mean, they're getting. I mean, a lot of people tried to stick around with tape technology. I know Slash did, and
Yep.
I know even when I got into, recording at the most basic levels in like 2001 or 2002, around there, people had tape machines, um, but they're getting rarer and rarer. They
Mhm.
really are, like the Studers and stuff, and they're getting more expensive.
Yeah.
It's like riding a horse to work. It's cool,
It's
but
cool, but
everyone else is getting to work faster than you are.
it's so true. That's funny. Yeah, we talked a lot about analog and digital recording in one of our shows before, and I think we were talking about how I don't. Were you on this? Were you with Slash when he's doing the Snake Pit stuff recording?
No, that was before my time.
Well,
I was in high school.
let's see. Maybe no. Maybe it was just. I don't know what it was, but it was maybe one of his last records that he did all tape with.
Yeah, no, he did everything up until I think the last one was two tape.
Okay, that's what I
But
thought.
it's also a combination of tape and Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Like they record to to tape and then dump it all into Pro. They're not
Do they use?
sitting there with
Do they?
razor blades splicing tape together.
Yeah. Do they use Clasp? Uh,
Clasp.
Clasp. That's a pro. It's kind of it's a way to go from analog
Oh,
to digital. So it'd be like how you would.
I have no idea what, like, audio engineers
Okay, well I'll
are
have to
like
ask.
pro gamers. They sit at a computer and they do that stuff so fast and silently, and they're so good at their job. I I've no idea what those guys are doing.
Okay, yeah.
I
That's
mean, I can work, I can make demos and work Pro Tools and all that, but it's like, I can change my oil, but I don't sit there and, these guys are race car drivers.
yeah, and that's interesting you bring that up because it's like the, there are so many big jobs in professional musician, touring and things like that. And, your job is so important, but it's your job. You don't really have a whole lot of other jobs. And, if you go to record at a recording studio, you have an engineer, and then he might have somebody that, sets up mics or whatever. But your job is working with the artist directly and making sure that they have everything they need on stage. And so that's, but you know so much about all of it just from working with live, the live aspect of it.
I know enough about other people's jobs to know when they're not doing their job and to know when they're good at their job. Like I have no idea how to do monitors, but I know a good monitor guy when I see one.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, and then, but there are people who do both. There's guitar techs that get into sound. There's guitar techs that do. I've worked as a drum tech for one tour. Uh, I don't know how to play drums, but the band I was working for, I was with Fear Factory, and they wanted a drum tech for Gene Hoglan to do some makeup dates. So they didn't have the budget for both a guitar tech and a drum tech because it was like, I don't know, a week and a half of makeup. So they're just like, hey, why don't you be Gene's drum tech instead of our guitar tech?
Yeah.
I said, and Gene knew me, and he knew I was like, look, if you're okay with this, I'm okay with this. And he showed me how to set up his drum set. So I did what he showed me every night. On Guns N' Roses and with Slash, we've got Amy James, who's, an amazing drum tech. And then, before Amy, we had Gump, who was Neil Peart's drum tech. So I calling myself a drum tech in that circle. I collected a check as a drummer or a drum tech, but it's like,
Yeah.
when people ask me, are you a guitar player? And, when you're standing in a room with Slash and Steve Stevens, you don't say yes. You're like,
You're like, oh, okay. That's awesome. But you do get to go up there and actually play in front of all these people before Slash or whoever your teching for gets up there and plays, which is kind of cool.
I get my few seconds of fame in the PA sometimes. Yeah.
That's pretty fun though. And so do you so if you're a bass tech and you're up there, isn't that much more fun because there's so much like so much
Low end.
low end?
Stages aren't really low end heavy.
Some of them
Like,
are. Oh my God.
ideally they're not.
Yeah, typically yours aren't. Your your
Yeah.
monitors are out there.
Our low end's usually in the house. I like checking bass. I have a few songs that like I'll play Cryptopsy's Phobophile or Firefaces, or sorry, High on Fire Fireface, which nobody recognizes.
Mhm.
But yeah, like to me, and then when you're up there checking, like sometimes if everything goes good and you see Tony Iommi in the crowd, you'll play something off the new Sabbath album as a nod. Other times you're making sure everything's working. You're just pedaling the E string because your artist is walking towards you and you guys got going, you good? We're on in 30. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, we're good. So yeah. And then sometimes, like you'll play something pertinent to where you are as a joke. I don't know. I can't think of any examples, but I once played the national anthem at a NASCAR game because I didn't know I was in the PA.
The whole national anthem, or just the first part?
I was with a band and they were on fractals, so I was trying out the fractal and I had my in-ears in and I thought only I could hear me playing.
Yeah.
And our monitor guy or sound guy or whoever decided to bring me up in the mix. So
Yeah.
I was playing guitar, I thought myself, and guys were stopping and taking their hats off, and I was like, oh, shit.
So
that's one song you can't mess up.
Yeah. So that's like a one-off show. You mentioned Fractal, which we actually talk a lot about that in Bass Cafe because that's what Dean travels with when he travels with Nina Strauss.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy. So what got you into being a tech? I know you were a guitar player and then...
Well, I was a TV show host for a minute.
Okay.
I had a death metal TV show right after I got out of the Marines with some friends. And I knew I wanted to stay in the music business, but I also, I saw pretty quick that, even the top tier death metal bands is not really, it's now knowing them 20 years later, I see how they've made a career of it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I thought that if you're playing guitar in Napalm Death at 25 and you leave when you're 35, what do you do then?
Yeah.
And I've always liked working with tools and taking things apart and fixing them. I've been woodworking a lot since the downtime, and I've made my own guitars, amps, pedals, furniture. I fix my own car and house and all that.
Yeah.
So I've always liked being handy. And there is a job security kind of that goes with being a guitar tech, like as opposed to being a guitar player. I want bands that I'm working for to do well. I want shows to sell out. I want the band to be successful. I want the single to take off. But, if this band I'm working for this week doesn't take off, I can get a job with another band next week. And that's not so much an issue now. But, when I was starting off, you work with a band, and because when you're a beginner guitar tech, you work kind of with beginner bands and you hope you're working with one that's going to get big because they promise you like, oh, we're going to get on the big tour and we're going to bring you along. And it does happen. But, you're kind of like married to the success of someone else, So there's that degree of security in being a guitar tech. And as a guitar, as a guitar player and as a guitar tech, I've definitely seen a lot more of the world and lived, more of the rock and roll life, I guess you could say,
Mhm.
as a guitar tech than I think I would have been able to as a guitar player. Um, you know, I loved playing guitar and I loved being in a band. When I had my band, it was one of the greatest times of my life and the best tours I ever did. And I'd love to do it again. But I mean, playing in a grindcore band would never have, you know, gotten me shark diving in Africa with the guy from Collective Soul. You know, it never would have put me in private jets.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have seen as much of the world as I've been able to, and you know, get to experience what I have by being, you know, attached to these legacy guys, you know, that do live like royalty, really. So that's the trade-off. I'm not famous, but I get to live like I am.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the bassists that you've worked with. We talk a lot about tone and change, like, changing your strings is a big part of your tone, obviously. Some of these big guys, do they change their strings often as bass players? Do they change their string often? Because I know guitar players do, but um, what do you see out there a lot?
Usually, I mean, on a big tour, you kind of have to, or they'll break.
Mhm.
Uh, my rule of thumb usually is I'll change guitar strings depending on the artist and the tour and stuff. But any kind of like main guitar, I'll change strings every show.
Well, what about bass?
Um, a bass, I'll usually go 2 or 3 shows. 3 shows is usually, you know, my limit. Um, I can do a fourth show on bass strings. Usually, I mean, and also some guys sweat more than others, you know, stuff like that. Sometimes you're doing like if you're doing cold shows, your bass strings are going to last longer than if you're doing European festivals where you're playing it on a sweaty stage with sand and dust and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave them on for, you know, if you fly far, you change your string. So you always default to changing your strings when in doubt.
Yeah.
But bass strings, I mean, they're harder to stretch for one thing. I can do it, but if I change, you know, if I have to stretch 5 sets of bass strings in a row, I'm, you know, my hands are, it's
Yeah,
a lot.
it's a lot.
So yeah, usually I'll do bass strings every 2 or 3 shows. And I can't think of any artists that have complained much about that. I mean, there's some guy like Will Romer from Mortician, probably not a whole lot of Mortician fans on your channel, but he famously like didn't change his bass strings for, I don't know, it was one of those urban legends at the time, but you know, like 20 years or ever. Or I mean, that band's been around 30 some odd years now. I don't think he has 30-year-old bass strings he's been touring on. That'd be
Yeah.
pretty incredible. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
don't
some
change
people
mine very
don't
often.
know.
Yeah, well, I use flat wounds and I like that tone.
Yeah, see, tonally with flat wounds, you know, that's you're looking for a rounder tone. So people that want to, if you want to stand out in the mix, you change your strings more.
Yeah.
Some people don't like the sound of new bass strings. I personally think they sound best their second show.
Yeah, I don't like the brand new sound of them at all.
Yeah, but I mean, like guitar strings are the opposite. All these guitars behind me will sound 20% better if I put brand new strings on them.
Right.
It, because those most of those strings have been on there several months, and
So
it, you know,
does that automatically make a bass tech have an easier job than a guitar tech?
I would say usually being a bass tech is easier than being a guitar tech. Um, Usually bass players don't have as many tunings.
Uh-huh.
You know, so usually you'll get guys that'll play the whole show on 1 or 2 basses versus, you know, guitar players will have their slide guitar and their drop D guitar and their open G guitar, or their guitar with single coils and their guitar with this and that.
And then they have two of every one of those
You
guitars.
have to have, yeah. I mean, as a bass player, you should have 2 of everything too.
Yeah.
Another thing with basses though is bass outputs. Like guitars have, you know, each guitar has a little bit different output but their range is usually a lot smaller than with a bass.
Uh-huh.
Like if you when I was working with Glenn Campbell years ago, our bass player for one gig had two basses. One of them was like an old, God, I'll probably get this wrong, but it was a Gretsch or a Rickenbacker or something like that, like, you know, with real soft passive pickups, and his other bass had active pickups.
Yeah.
And so when you unplug one bass and you plug in the other, your signal's 30 dB higher. And with guitar amps compress naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So, or most do. So that jump, you might get more distortion, but you're not going to like get the same, if your sound guy is getting a clean signal off your bass and all of a sudden the next song, your bass is 30 dB higher, you're clipping everything, and you just thrown off his entire game and his entire gain structures and all of his gates. And so, you really want to match your basses if you're going to be swapping them.
Yeah.
Or let the sound guy know what's going to happen. And yeah, and then like with bass, since you're not usually playing big chords, where you're gonna, you could probably play the same song. If a guitar player wants to be in G for a song, you could probably play the same bass.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
I never switch my bass.
Yeah.
I have the same bass for the whole show, because I can play all the songs on
exactly
on the same tuning.
And basses, they don't tend to go out of tune as easily as guitars. You're not bending strings as much. Once they're in tune, they tend to stay there, and they're easier to like, you step on your bass and just tune it up a little bit when you're out. So yeah, bass teching and bass rigs do tend to be simpler. I have had bass players, not naming any names, but like one bass player I worked for got to take a solo in the show. So then he decided he needed to have a pedal board for his solo and have a loop station in there. Cool. And so we had this whole pedal board just for his, 60-second bass solo. And it made, it wasn't hard and it was fun. And I built him a pedal board, but, usually bass players don't do that. Right. Like, Todd Kearns' bass rig is literally the wireless into a tuner at his feet where he can walk backwards. I set it up for him that way. It was Frank Bello did that with Anthrax.
Yeah.
And I just sort of took that trick where you have like a tuner in line just right next to the drum riser. So if you just want to check while your singer's saying something between songs, you just go check it out and then you're ready to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, bass rigs are.
That's what usually, I do. I'm straight into the tuner and I don't need
Bass is usually pretty hands-off. You usually don't have a lot of cues, like with guitar players, a lot of times I'll run the effects. I can't think of any bass player. I mean, I'm sure it's happened just because I'd be more surprised it hasn't, but I can't really think of any time I've been like running effects for a bass player. Some will have like a little chorus here and there, like on a little signature intro part or something, but most basses,
don't eat it, do they?
Yeah, real meat and potatoes,
Yeah. So you've worked with a lot of different types of players. I mean, Duff is straight up punk, he's with a pick and he's like straight, have you bass tech for Duff before or not really?
I've actually guitar teched for Duff.
You guitar tech for Duff because
he did
right? He plays acoustic sometimes, right?
Yeah, well, he did he's written 2 books, and for the second book, How to Be a Man, he did a single.
Yeah, you were there.
Yeah, and so he had me come into this. It was just him. It was like me, him, and Izzy Stradlin in the studio, and the drummer from Stone Sour.
Nice.
And like it was like the 4 of us and the engineer. So that was cool. That was the only time I've ever actually got to hang out with Izzy Stradlin. Thank you, Duff. I absolutely love Duff. When I say I could work with any bass player and I say Duff, it's mostly because of Duff. It's like I love working for Todd Kearns, not necessarily because of his rig or all that, is because I love Todd Kearns. He's one of my he's a good friend of mine,
Yeah, we're gonna get on the show for sure.
and that's a big part of, how easy the job is how well you get along with the person.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
And you've been, the last tour that I saw you on was with Bush.
Hmm. I
Um,
get along with Gavin great.
yeah, those guys are really nice. I want to get Corey on here for sure. I've talked to him a couple times about
Sure.
stuff. Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
Corey brought his studio where he does his own recording.
yeah, it's right next
Uh,
to
it,
Slash's locker, right?
not only is it right next door, but it used to be Mike Klink's studio.
Oh,
Not
nice.
for not in the Guns days, but he had like his own little studio set up in there, and we recorded the demos for World on Fire in that room.
Nice.
And then Corey moved in,
Oh,
and
cool.
then I became friends with Corey, and then I got offered the gig, and so I knocked on the door and I said, "I'm gonna see you more this summer."
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah, all those guys are really cool. Does Corey change his bass strings every show?
Corey's Corey shares a tech with the drummer, so
Oh,
they
really?
yeah. Bush has a drum and bass tech,
Okay.
um, and I think he gets his strings changed about every 2 or 3 shows. As we
Yeah,
make sure that happens.
cool.
And like because his stuff's on my side of the stage, I help troubleshoot when
Yeah,
I'm on the Bush tour. I'm not always on the Bush tour.
yeah.
Uh, I went back to Slash, and I think Brian Diaz came in.
Hmm.
I think he's still there. Great tech. Um, so yeah, and he's probably taking care of Corey on the side. It's not really your job, but drum techs set it up and say, "Hey, it's not working, bro." I'm like,
Yeah,
"Here's probably why."
yeah, you gotta have
Um,
somebody. Well, awesome. And when you did the Kings of Chaos stuff with Glenn Hughes, that was he had a few pedals because you ended up giving me one of the pedals he was using.
yeah, I built him a pedal board. I think that was for California Breed. He used that pedal board.
Okay,
Um,
so it wasn't the Kings of Chaos. It
he
was
might have had one for that. I'm trying to remember. He was on. I think he was on the. God, this was a long time ago and only a couple shows. I think he was on the other side of the stage when he played bass. I
okay.
I think he played bass from stage right, and I took care of Africa was the big one that he went on. And on Africa, he was stage right, him and Duff and Gilby. And I was stage left with Slash and God, who else was on that? Oh my God, I'm forgetting a name. It's one of my best friends. I love the guy to pieces.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I can edit it out. What are you thinking of?
Dave Kushner. I was there with Dave Kushner. Jesus. Don't tell Dave.
I'll edit it
Yeah,
out. Don't worry.
yeah, that was with Dave
Yeah,
Kushner.
yeah.
And then Steve Stevens came with us. We did South America with Steve Stevens.
Okay.
I think that sounds right. Steve Stevens is great too. I love working for him. He's like his gear,
Hmm.
he's one of the easiest people to work for just because he's such a gear nut himself
Hmm.
that his gear shows up like immaculate. Like he changed his own strings and intonated his own. Like we were at Mates one time and I was, supposed to be taking care of him. And he goes, and he opens his pedal board up and the knob falls off one of his pedals. And he goes, "Hey, Ace, do you have a 2 millimeter Allen wrench I could borrow?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm your tech." Like, yes, I have that wrench, but I mean, he knew exactly what size wrench he needed to fix his own gear. So yeah, he's that kind of player. And he's super nice, and his wife's great. He's just a great vibe, great guy, and great, really cool instruments. And
Yeah.
he gets these custom Friedman pink amps made for him.
Yeah.
Working with Steve Stevens is always a treat.
Cool. One more question before we go. So when you are working for a new artist, let's say bassist, because this is a bass thing,
Mhm.
um, when you go to maybe like dial in their sound, or you dial in, something that whatever you feel like is their sound, what do you do first? Like, what do you when you walk up to a new rig? What do you do?
I try and figure out what the last person did.
Okay.
I try and make when I come into something, it's not really my job unless I'm asked to like invent tones. It does happen, but like on a new gig, I want the artist to not realize, I mean, unless the old guy sucked and he wants a new guy, which, okay, whatever. But
Yeah.
I want it to be as seamless as possible. I want it to be, I try and turn things on and see if everything turns on and sounds like it's supposed to, and then adjust from there. Um, I don't, because there's so many ways to build a tone and so many approaches to it. I don't like to start from ground zero and try and like duplicate something, because there's just so many ways to go about it. Like, not to go back into guitars, but Slash has this really famous amp that, Marshall recreated. And, and I got the recreation and I got the real amp out and I dialed it in and I was like, this thing sounds fucking weird as hell.
Yeah.
And then finally Adam Day came up to me one day and he said, yeah, that amp's weird as shit, dude. You got to dial it in all of this, none of that, and stick it through one of these things to get that tone. I never would have thought of that, So
Yeah.
So there's so many ways to like use one piece of gear, and there's just so many variables in there that I try and recreate. I try and take the pieces that are in front of me. Like sometimes I'll fill in for somebody and I won't know, I will have to build a tone. I'll fly into like for a new band and rental gear. So like I'm getting cases, like I'm opening cases, and to try and recreate a sound I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
And you kind of go with like, how does this band sound to me? But if you've only heard the record, then you don't, trying to recreate a record live isn't necessarily, you only have so many hours in the day, and then you only have the gear in front of you.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask like whoever's there, like, your sound guy is going to be a big help. Like, especially, if they've had the same sound guy for a while, I'll set it up, dial it in what, I have sort of my default settings I'll use. Like if you hand me an amp, I'll put it where I think it's going to sound right, just based on my knowledge of the band.
What's your default setting for like a good bass sound that's not too one way or the other?
Basically any new piece of gear, if I don't know it, like, I mean, you just sort of like put everything at 5, and like, especially EQ, you try and get a natural signal and then adjust from there, as opposed to like trying to like, yeah, the idea especially with a bass, is that if you start with a good sounding bass, then you don't have to do as much to it to try and fix it, so you just sort of get the right levels and the right amount of thump and growl. And a lot, like some people use 2 bass amps, like with Slash, with Todd, we use 2 bass amps. Like one's a little grittier and one's a little cleaner, so one kind of has that little bit of peaky distortion to it where you can kind of hear the notes, and the other amp has all that low end that you feel. Because that's sort of another thing, is that like the more distortion you have, the less, as you get into more distortion, you get into less low end and less feel, less,
those mids come up, and you want mids to cut through, but you don't want there to be so much mid and high that you don't get the actual bass.
Yeah, because you need that part that shakes people's shorts, that turns that song into more than just a sound. It turns it into a feeling,
Exactly.
So yeah, if you have a really distorted bass, you take all your low end and you're just squishing it into a fuzz sound, which has its place. I mean, like, Peter Steele played bass like that in Typo Negative.
Yeah.
So it's a sound.
Yeah.
Les Claypool doesn't worry about holding down the low end. He does whatever the hell he wants.
Right.
And that's why he's Les Claypool.
Yeah.
So there's no limit it's art. There's no limit to how you can approach it. But yeah, there's also ways to make it sound transparent, I guess and let the instrument and the performance shine through, as opposed to just, trying to put so much sugar in your cereal that all you taste is sugar.
Yeah. 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 And I think with everything that encompasses like what a guitar player is or a bass player is or your drummer, like every aspect it defines their tone, right? So
Yeah.
if you're a bass player, it's everything. I mean, it could be even the your nails not being cut. That
It, yeah, tone is it is a personal thing. And I mean, I've worked with enough guitar players that have their signature tone that I know that it's them. I can put an artist on rental gear with somebody, a loaner guitar, and they're going to sound like them.
yeah.
And I can pick up, everyone, not to keep going back to the guy in the hat, but like, it was like, I want to sound like Slash. What do I buy? And I'm like, it's not really something you could buy, because I play Slash's guitar through Slash's amp in Slash's studio, sitting in Slash's chair,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't sound like him. So they're not a thing here you could buy that's going to make you sound like him. I mean, there's components and parts and stuff like that, but there's just so many variables that people, there's a nearly infinite number of variables to a recording and to a live performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people will hear an album and think, oh, I like that guitar sound, I'm going to go buy that pedal. That pedal is, whatever it is this much of the sound, because there's the microphone and the producers and the engineers and the mastering engineers and your home stereo and however the hell you dicked with your controls so that your car shakes at the intersection. Like, there's so many variables. Like, you put on a song on your headphones and in your car, it's going to sound totally different. That has nothing to do with a pedal anyone used. So it's in the hands, it's in the person, it's in the soul or the spirit or whatever, mystical, magical, artistic word you want to use. There is an element of magic to all this, or whatever you want to call it.
A different dimension for sure.
There is an undefinable element to music.
Yeah. It's interesting because we all speak the language of music.
Well, and animals too. I could put on different songs and like my dog doesn't know, oh yeah, this is AC/DC, I like this song, or oh, this is Vivaldi. Like, they'll listen to something and either relax or be like, this is exciting, or this is weird, or they react to music and they know what's comfortable, or too fast, or too slow, or too creepy.
Yeah, true. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for all your information today.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on your show. It's always good to talk to you.
All right. Well, that was fun with Ace.
Welcome back. And that was so informative.
Yeah, he's obviously has a lot of experience being a guitar tech and, well, tech in general.
I feel so fortunate to be able to get to see like an inside eye to so many of our guests, like journeys.
And what's crazy is a lot of them know each other.
Yeah, dude, everybody, as you do more and more, you find out that the world just gets smaller and smaller, and like,
it's so incestual. It's crazy. So, which is why you want to be cool.
Yeah.
Be a good hang and take the jobs that that you're going to thrive in. Because if you take a job where you're going to hate the music, but the people are cool, you probably bear through it. But if you think that if you're going to join a band where you don't like the music and you probably don't like half the crew, you're probably not the best for the job.
I took a gig working for a band, and I did not get along with one of the members at all. And it was to my detriment because, like, even though we like squashed everything or whatever, it was totally apparent that if we would have got along better on both of our accounts, A, I would have wanted to work with him again, and B, he could have hired me for other stuff. But we just didn't gel. And you can't get upset if that stuff happens, right? Like don't get stepped on. Definitely stand up for yourself. Definitely do what you have to do for yourself. You know, I'll tell you, that's one of the hardest things I think in this industry to navigate is how to be pushy enough to stay the course and how to and where to bend, you know, like, because you never know if you're the one who's on the road to success, you know, because if you're on the road to success and someone else isn't, you can tell them to pound salt, right? But if they're on the road to success and you tell them to pound salt, that could hurt your success.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to navigate, you know, like for me, I could be a douche. I like to think that if I am, it's semi-warranted. Maybe not as much as I'm giving it, but at least a percentage of that, you know, like it's knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them, you know, like it's what it is, you know.
Pick the balance.
I once put in my resignation for a gig right before a band's set time, and I still worked that gig and that set time like I was in love with that band.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the gig, decided, you know, like I had to talk it out with the band, and it wound up not working. Wound up continuing to work for them throughout like that time, and it even led to more work. But you know, and that's another thing. Like I put in my resignation as I was handing a band to their instruments, and that gig stuff happened, and that gig I was on point.
Yeah.
You know, personal feelings don't matter. Do your job. Do your job. You know, I feel things. I'm sure you feel things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. When you're on stage, it's about you and your performance and the crowd, you know, you're not, no, everybody has to leave it, you know, for the stage. You can't take that stuff with you on the stage. And that's a professional's way of looking at it, kind of compartmentalizing your feelings into work and non-work.
And it's hard to compartmentalize too, because like someone like me, and I'm not the only one, right? Like very many techs are also performers. Not all, but very many are. And you do. Like I said, I've made mistakes, and at times my ego has not been in check. You know, I've forgotten what job I was doing at times. Next time around, I try to remember better. You know, like I actively focus to remember better, right? This has been all along our career. You make mistakes in life and in business and in music and in art, and you just got to try and turn it into a happy accident. You know, even if you're an asshole. You know, there's very many bands that have had fist fights yet continue. You know, there's very many bands that have fist fights and don't continue. Very many of those also. So yeah, so like the whole point of this is like, what does it really take to be world class, man? Like world class player, world class tech, world class industry worker, business employee, entrepreneur, brand ambassador. You know, we are all of these things. We are everything and so much more, right? We've left the world of made it to the world of do it.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to be obsessed with it. Whatever our journey is, whatever our ladder of success looks like, we have to be obsessed with getting at the top of that ladder.
And again, it is your own, like one of the things that makes it our own personal journey is where do we stand our ground and where do we bend?
Yeah.
You know, I've not agreed to stuff that bosses have said, and it's been very apparent on my face that I did not agree, but I did what I was supposed to do. Yeah. And at the end of the gig, I was told that was a pro move.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know what?
Even if you're burning up on the inside, just keep it there best you can.
Yeah.
Time will pass.
Yeah.
Do your job.
Yeah.
Do the pro move.
And other pro moves that you have to make on tour, and being on tour is, you have to be at bus call at the right time. You have to be at sound check at the right time. You have to sound check properly. You can't phone in sound check. There's many times I've stood up on stage, got all my stuff on there, didn't want to do it, and felt so like phoning it in, but you can't do it. You have to be present. But guess what? After that, everything's fine. You just go get dressed and play the show. So
do you like that? Do you like getting into your
getting into it?
Getting into Holly what is what do you
Well, I get to dress up, so I think it's fun. I get to pick out my little outfit and put on my makeup.
Do you guys always wear all white all the time? Because everything I've ever seen, you guys are always wearing all white.
Yeah. So the story behind that is
everyone wears all black.
No, they used to wear just kind of 70s clothes, and then the drummer decided one day that she wanted to project Barbarella onto the stage, and so everyone.
So you guys became a projector screen.
Yeah, so everybody was supposed to wear white, and then they projected Barbarella, and she made the set go with the movie. So after that,
you guys still do anything like that ever?
We wear white because that's what everybody talked about. They didn't talk about the movie. They didn't talk about Barbarella. They didn't talk about any of that. They just talked about the white. And so they're like, well, that's our thing. And I think it's great because when I first knew of Zepparella, I remember them wearing white and, 4 girls wearing white, putting on a badass show. And if it was another Zeppelin tribute band, I don't think I would have remembered it.
Your drummer's dirty blonde, right? Or
Clementine, so she has kind of orangish hair.
Right, and then your singer is brunette, and you're a blonde, and Gretchen's a redhead. With the white clothes, that looks so cool, dude.
We're like power, or like your Power Ranger hat. We're like superheroes.
Like Powerpuff Girls. You like the Powerpuff Girls. You each got your own little color there.
Yeah, we all have our own color.
Go green Powerpuff.
Well, what Gretchen likes to say is we have something for everyone.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I like it. I think it's great. It's great to see that because not only like for reals, like for just visual aspects, if the most common thing in music has been seeing a bunch of dudes with the same black haircut in the same black clothes for 25 years in metal, to see 4 girls all in white with all like seeing your hair automatically like triggers like, oh, they're different personalities, right? It's just like you each have your own Power Ranger color, right? Like, and so that's so cool from the norm, It's as Seth Godin would say, I think Godin, I don't remember, I don't know, but the author about marketing, he has this great book that I've read a few times called The Purple Cow, and it talks about how he used to drive around in the countrysides with his parents in France. And like when you're not used to seeing cows and you see a cow, you're like, whoa, look at the cows. But then you're from Texas, so you know this. So you'll get to this one area where there'll just be cows for miles. And there's so many cows that you stop. There's no longer a feeling of, wow, look at the cow. Like, wow, look at the cows. It's the cows.
Cow.
But if you saw one purple cow, you'd never forget that you saw that purple cow. You'd never forget it.
Which is kind of what we've talked about before, standing out as a bassist. You really do want to stand out.
Yeah.
But it goes with being in a band too. I mean, bands need to stand out, and we're coming into this age where you're gonna have to be different because it's like almost society's making you be different. So,
listen, MTV got lost to reality TV. Yeah. And why did it get lost to reality TV? Because music was telling the same old story. And reality TV was telling every single person's individual, absolutely gut-wrenching, tragic story of despair and depression and 17 kids at once. 16 and Pregnant beat out all of our favorite bands' music videos. Like, let's think about that. Yeah. Why? Because it's a tragic personal story that even if there's another 16-year-old pregnant girl, like, her story's different. Like, her parents don't accept her. Like, this one's do accept her, but her boyfriend's parents don't. Like, it's the Jerry Springer effect, right? Without with that drama, we're so much more interesting. You know, where it used to be mystique was what gave you your allure. Now it's how tragic you are
Well,
in
I
some
think,
respects.
well, with that, and then also like as far as bands are concerned, with that, the look and the partying that used to go on, I'm sure a lot of people think nowadays that bands don't get along, or there's so much partying. How can everybody get along? There's a lot of we get a lot of talk about our band being all female must not get along because girls don't really get along that well. Well, our band gets along better than any band that I've ever been in. So, um, and it's because there's no ego and there's appreciation for everyone, and we're
If
authentic.
everyone's appreciative of one another, it's very easy to not have an ego.
Yeah.
When one person does not do their job in a constantly moving machine,
Mm-hmm.
egos tend to burn from friction,
Mm-hmm.
right? The sharing of responsibilities is the lubrication for the machine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in this. You guys got to all be on the same page. Everyone will always have their responsibilities. Some people's will be lighter than others. Some people's will be harder than others. Everything is based upon skill set, mentality, and work ethic, right? But like, if you have a member of your band who can't do all the things that you can do, don't give them a hard time. You're just gonna, pour gasoline on that fire, right?
Bring them up to your level so that now your band's on this level instead of being on.
When you have a member of your band who absolutely it can do that stuff and doesn't do that stuff, those are tricky scenarios. Sometimes you have to push your brothers or your sisters, farther and harder.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to just accept who they are.
Yeah, but
Um,
a good attitude goes a long way because it most people who are wanting to tour are wanting to tour because they want that experience and they do want to play music for a living and they want to have these relationships, and the perks of being a musician on tour is pretty good too. So
yeah, 2 free beers and $7 a day.
well, and then there's also all these other bands and being able to network and that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
But
all the lies we tell each other.
yeah,
All the lies we tell ourselves to sleep in a van for 15 hours straight while another member of the band drives for 15 hours straight.
right.
You got to love it, and you got to be working together, and you got to be on the same team to traverse such trying moments.
Exactly. And they're typically people want to be impressed or want to impress you. So if you just are honest with them and bring them to your level of where you understand things, they're typically going to react in a good way. I've only had a couple of shows blow up, but it was because whoever did it was just not working with anybody that day.
Like a stage manager can make or break a show full of big bands.
Yeah.
Just the stage manager alone.
Mm-hmm.
A single glitching microphone cable
Mm-hmm.
can piss off every single band on the bill.
Yeah.
It really can. It really
Absolutely.
can.
Yeah.
A sound guy who can't cut feedback from the stage monitors,
Yeah. Can
not
hit
gonna fly, dude. Not
yeah,
gonna
and
fly.
a front of house guy that has a bad attitude. We don't deal with that anymore.
Man, one of my favorite things about the infancy of the internet were the pissed off sound guy memes. Like, that's such a stereotypical thing, man. Like the pissed off house sound guy when you come into the town, like it doesn't work, and that's another thing too that points out how strong your team has to be, because you will show up to the gigs where you have what feels like zero cooperation from the at-home team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments, in that face of adversity, you have to face it as a team, and you have to conquer it as a team.
Yeah.
There's been there was one show that I was teching, and we didn't have a bass cab because we were sharing the cab with the other band, the headlining band on the tour, and I was teching it. But that one day, the two bands had two shows in two different venues. So we didn't have a bass cab, and the house was supposed to provide a bass cab. And I like can't even describe to you the horrors that they had and what they called bass cabs. And you think that that's such a simple request. It's not. It's not.
I think we talked about this before. You know, you have a rider if you're flying into a gig and you're supposed to have what's on that rider, and most of the time it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah. They had a rider. We were told. I was in contact. I was the tech / assistant tour manager of that tour, and I was in contact with this dude. I was given specs. I was told specs. I gave specs. It was specs out the ass.
Yeah.
We showed up there. Different story altogether.
Yeah.
You know, it was chaos. It was chaos. It was a bass cab. Long story short, it was a bass cabinet that didn't work.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was a bass cabinet that didn't work.
Yeah. And then that's when you need a good crew guide or tech around that can help you.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you know how to do it yourself, right?
I was the New Jersey guy in a New York venue. Let me just say we're ready to roll.
Yeah, you guys hate each other or something, right?
Yeah, it's because we both have the same attitude, but we're across the pond. So like a New Yorker looks at someone from New Jersey and he's like, hey, screw that guy. And in New Jersey, he's like, oh yeah, screw your mother. Like, and it just goes back and then it escalates and it's like, you know, it just goes that way. In fact, my very first day working for Prong, I didn't know that Tommy Victor was from New York, right? Because he lived in LA and I had no idea that he lived in New York. And that was one of the very first things that I told him. I was like, yeah, my Jersey attitude comes from dealing with all those assholes from New York. And he's like, what are you trying to say? I was like, what do you mean? What am I trying to say? You wanted the two of us to drive on the road and see what happens? Who's going to honk first, pal? Who's going to honk first?
Oh,
you know, like one of us. But it's the truth. It's you know, it's just a dynamic for this region. And it's very funny. It's very, you know, that attitude of the go-getter New York City. It definitely, most of those people who work in New York City, all that driving, firefighters, this, you know, like businessmen, that, you know, stock market, police, NYPD, everyone, the union workers, Con Edison, everyone, all those guys that deal with all that crap, live in New Jersey. You know, like that's just the truth. They don't live in New York. They work there. They run New York. They live in New Jersey or Connecticut. Yeah. They commute to the city.
Yeah.
You know, and that's we used to have this term. What was it? Sunday drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or around here it was New York driver. If you were in New Jersey when I was growing up, and you were in like your friend's parents' car, you were in your grandmother's car, it didn't matter what saint of an angel was behind the steering wheel. Like, you know, I've seen my little old grandmother scream out the window because the person who did the thing had a New York license plate. And it was like if someone did something and had the opposing plate back in the day, it was like magnified times 10, dude. You know, you New York driving. That's a thing. You know, when I was in LA, I never saw anyone hanging out the window screaming, "You Nevada driver!" Like it didn't happen. Like
just drive past you and keep going really fast.
Really fast in LA, not for real.
Well,
not on the 101. You're like,
well, during COVID, you can definitely.
Yeah. I thought I lived 45 minutes away from work. And then the first day of quarantine, when I still had to drive to Pasadena, I realized I lived 10 minutes away from work. I had no idea. I had no idea that I lived 10 minutes away from work down the highway. I thought I lived 45 minutes away from work down the highway. That was like, what?
Crazy.
It was eye-opening. But yeah, guys, listen, it's perseverance, it's hard work, it's dedication, it's making mistakes, it's getting back up from them, it's networking, it's knowing your stuff. These are these things that make us on or put us on the path to being as professional as we can. Again, all of these things that we talk about, yes, we're looking at this from the viewpoint of a bass player for the most part. But everything and those metaphors can be used for all avenues.
Yeah. Yeah. Business and anything really. If you're
Business, education, discipline, it doesn't matter. I have a student who is a martial arts instructor, and quite often I get to make the metaphors about the discipline of martial arts versus the discipline of being a musician. They're very similar. You don't have to kick your shin against this wooden board for 45 minutes to strengthen up yourselves, and harden up your bones, but you have to do that to your fingertips when you're running scales. Same story,
There's a great book called Zen Guitar that talks kind of the same, taking the music practice and his dojo practice and kind of mirroring them together. And
that's
pretty good book.
I have this TCB tattoo, and it's a Elvis Presley quote: "Taking care of business in a flash."
Yeah.
And it comes from you guys can look it up online. There's this thing called the TCB oath, and it's basically Elvis like talking about how the real way to success, like I'll summarize it, is like the way to overall success is to respect all instructors, respect all of your masters, and respect all of your peers, and take all techniques and put them into one. All techniques into one. That's like the main takeaway from that.
Yeah.
Is, that's where your humility has to come in. Yes, you have to be proud of yourself, but you also have to say you're sorry and say, I was wrong. And sometimes just saying you're sorry and realizing you were wrong, that'll save the gig sometimes. Even if you do blow your top.
Yeah.
Sometimes just saying you're sorry and working really hard and making up for it and buying someone dinner or buying them a beer or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes
they rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Rip off.
Yeah, but there's one guy that I didn't get along with. I didn't talk to him on the road for 3 days. We had a 3-day drive across the country and no shows in between. And in that spat, we got into a spat. And I finally, at the next show, I really didn't want to at the time. You know what I mean? Because, when you're pissed off at someone, you're pissed off at someone. But I knew that the better thing to do as a human being was to be professional and say, all right, man, can we squash this? Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, even though I was the one that was reacting to something that was done to me, swallow your pride, take the blame, say you're sorry, move on.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to be the first one.
Almost every time you have to be the first one. Like, because that's what it takes, right? Like in order for any discrepancy to cease, someone has to succumb. You're right. My bad. That's the only way anything bad ends. Even if you're right, doesn't matter. Say you're sorry and say you were wrong. That thought, that frame of mind, that argument over the NFL draft and your fantasy football team, like, don't let that affect your next single. Maybe let the dude who never tunes his guitar have it, because you don't want to add a tuned guitar in your next single. But it's like, again, choose your battles.
Exactly. Well, cool. So this has been a fun episode for everybody. We talked
episode 666.
Yeah, and this is actually where we thought we would end off with all of the ideas we have, but we just keep rolling with them. So
keep rolling.
So what do we talk about next time?
What we have here on the script is, in this next episode, we will be discussing about being in a band and why you should just say yes to everything, every gig that you possibly can. Well, there's only one key point in our script actually that we didn't touch on, and it would be great to touch on in the next episode. Yeah. But it's the importance of, like, if you're going to play bass, have a bunch of different basses, have 4 strings, have 5 strings, have 6 strings, have stand-up basses, have a banjo, have an acoustic bass, learn how to play piano, like learn how to sing backup, learn as many different things as you can, because you never know where you'll benefit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a guitar player / bass player / guitar tech / bass tech / stagehand / assistant tour manager / class A CDL driver. I can do all, and I know how to solder. Like, so I could do all kinds of things. You know, when it comes to bringing me on the road, I come with a toolbox and a couple basses and a couple guitars and my machine keys. It is what it is. But I guarantee you, I if I'm bringing that stuff, it's because if I need it, I'm going to have it.
Yeah, it's always important to be prepared. So, we did talk a little bit about being in a band today, but there's so many things that we can talk about. So we'll save them for next time.
Same bat time, same bat channel. So in case you guys haven't caught on yet, this episode is going to, well, it has already played, but every episode is airing at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every single Monday. Every Monday, that is our air time. If in the event we have any form of technical difficulties, the episode will air at 6 p.m. But we are going to air every episode at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Spotify, and everywhere else that you can listen to your podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this extended episode.
It's a pretty long one.
This is a pretty long one. And we actually is shorter for you guys. We have like 45 minutes of just us talking in the beginning that I recorded. So we're gonna have some cool behind the scenes stuff coming. Make sure to follow Holly West on Patreon at patreon.com/HollyWestMusic and Holly West Music on all of the internet things.com, Instagram, Facebook, and alike. Make sure to follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/DeanMusicOfficial. And again, Dean Music Official on all internet things alike.com, Instagram, and in between. Thank you so very much. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. Make sure to comment and tell us what kind of things you want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, let us know what else we can be talking about. We have tons of subjects to touch on, but we would also
And here's another little reminder. Plan 916 is going to be giving us a set of P-bass pickups to give away to one of our lucky listeners. Make sure to listen to the next couple episodes to hear details about that. Bye, guys.
See you later.